Okay, hello, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed the sumptuous lunch that we have prepared for all of you. So without further ado, we're going to dive straight into our second panel, the topic, making arts and culture accessible to everyone. So I'd like to introduce our very distinguished panel. Firstly, Ms. Jean Lu, founder, Superhero Me. Dr. Lucy Bolger, lecturer of music therapy, creative art therapies, research unit, University of Melbourne, Australia. Ms. Izan Satrina, Chief Executive Officer, Cultural Economy Development Agency, Malaysia. Ms. Rachelle Tan, Head of Venues and Programs Management, Esplanade. And Mr. Paul Adams, Learning and Engagement Manager, Singapore Repertory Theatre. Our panel will be moderated by Mrs. Rebecca Chew, Academy Principal, Singapore Teachers Academy for the Arts. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to give a big hand for our panel, please. So likewise, please log on into Pigeonhole. You can ask your questions via Pigeonhole anytime throughout the session. Also later on, should you wish to use the microphones, our moderator will call for it. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the time over to Mrs. Rebecca Chew.
Hello everybody, welcome back, and thank you for coming back to the session immediately after a sumptuous lunch and a short siesta for some of us. This is a very exciting panel that I have the privilege to host today. They come from different fields, and I was just sharing with some of them that these are also voices from the practice. They are the practitioners, they have an experience, and they will share with us the ways of thinking, the ways of knowing, and from their years of lived and shared experiences with the communities that they work with, they'll bring to the table the gifts and strengths of how they can share their ideas of accessibility and how we as practitioners within cultural institutions, either by ourselves as individuals or as collectives, we can add value to the communities around us. So without much further ado, can I please introduce a dear friend, Jean Lu. Let me tell you a bit more about Jean. She is a photojournalist by training, and her work with Superhero was something that for us as educators and teachers, we spent time this year as senior teachers and master teachers to go into her field of work. And what wonder and joy when you see the advocacy that she does to give accessibility to the arts for different types of children, young early learners, and also following them through longitudinally in the area. Jean practices not only social advocacy, creative arts, and community mobilization. I feel that Jean has a powerful, dynamic personality which she brings to the table. She has a network that she mentors young people, and that's the sustainability part of the work. Building on her training as a photojournalist, she found a calling in community arts with an NAC, National Arts Council project, mentoring youth mentorships to arts and elder care. So at this point, I want to also congratulate her for her recent recognition by our country for her commitment to inclusion through the arts. Jean was recently conferred the Singapore Youth Award 2018. Jean Lu, please.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So my name is Jean, and I lead an inclusive arts movement called Superhero Me. I also work in early childhood development at the Lian Foundation, really coming up with very fresh ideas of how we can change the status quo for children from less privileged families and for children with special needs in our country. So today I'll share a bit about how Superhero Me came about, how we work, and why the arts can play a wonderful big role in fostering inclusion in Singapore. So that's us there. We're a ground-up inclusive arts movement, and we really try to empower children of different abilities through the arts, and this term called social mixing, which might be quite unique to Singapore. What we do is to use the arts as a place to get children from different backgrounds and with special needs to socialize with the public. Before I begin, I'd just like to share a quick 1-minute video, just sharing with you what we do. So that's us in a nutshell. I just quickly like to run through our journey because unlike other, say, art schools or arts groups, we're a very unique blend of people. We started off as an advocacy program and were born in this neighborhood called Lengkok Bahru, which is an area to many rental flats in Singapore. These 15 preschoolers are our, what we call our pioneer batch of heroes, and today most of them still work with us in a different capacity. First off, of course, we start off with the idea of costume crafting, but really kind of kicking out people like Iron Man and Elsa, and really inspiring children to discover who they are as role models themselves, who they can be despite their family's social circumstances. So we spent about 12 weeks with the kids, turning ideas from paper to a doll and a costume that they can wear. We then did a photo shoot in their neighborhood, with the bigger idea here being that they can bring light to the darkness no matter their family's circumstance. Some other of our pioneer heroes are Rao the Weather Warrior, Benjamin the Animal Whisperer, Raouf the Snow Globe. Very quickly in year 2015, if you guys remember, it was SG50, and we were pushed by then the Lian Foundation to really come up with ways to inspire Singaporean families to think if Singapore can be more than a tuition nation. So that really inspired us to use the arts to talk about things like resilience, creative confidence, empathy, and that also got us thinking, how are we going to sustain this movement that we love so much? So this was the first time we actually worked with people we call captains, volunteers, and trained them in working with children through the arts. So that's us. Our philosophy is really start small and start strong. The following year, we discovered our relevance in inclusion. We realized that the arts, in its form and the way it was being run, really had a lot of potential in bringing kids of different abilities together. We piloted inclusive art tours, where we would purposefully invite a class of children with special needs from a special education school and put them together through an experience with mainstream kids, preschoolers mostly. And the outcome was very inspiring, and we wanted to keep getting better at it. We toyed with more forms of art, moving from visual arts to music with the Yongsuto Conservatory. We took art out to the park. We exposed our kids to carpentry. And last year was really a turning point in trying to develop a method of how we utilize the inclusive arts as part of our advocacy machinery. What we did really was to try and create environments and spaces that open children's minds to disability. So it's not about being in a classroom setting where an adult tells you you have to be nice to that friend on wheelchair, but about putting things in like a noodle wall, a spaceship rocket, the world's tallest cake, anything to show you that creativity and people come in all forms, all shapes and sizes, and everyone can bring value to the table. We're very proud this year to be one of the headline acts for Singapore Art Week. That gave us a different way of working with our children. So we actually paired artists who have had existing friendships with the kids on 4-month-long journeys where they followed their kids back to their hometown, because some of our children are from China, really going deep onto that one-on-one relationship and taking the process and outcome as a way of advocacy. In March this year, we explored dance, specifically working with children with multiple disabilities with the one goal of getting them off their wheelchairs, because the wheelchair is so closely tied to their identity. We also partnered the Art Science Museum. What we did during the school holidays was to really bring in the special needs community to the Art Science Museum, while providing that sort of facilitation support to go through exhibitions like Future World, Marvel. And what we did was also to facilitate interaction between a completely different audience that goes to the art science and an audience that is the special needs community. We also went on to conduct training for the Art Science Museum's family programs team, and now they actually run these tours on their own. We're very excited to be embarking on an arts residency program in Rainbow Centre, which runs 3 special education schools. The challenge here is what we call reverse inclusion, where instead of the typical way of bringing in special needs communities into arts venues, how can we embed artists, train them, build a community, and open up the special education school to regular families to come in? We're very excited to be working with things like assistive technology to create art, and really using theatre to bring out a new side to these children. So that's us. I just conducted a series of experimental play labs in December. So really, I think if we to sum up our mission, it's really about realizing and harnessing the potential of kids with disabilities, special needs, and from less privileged backgrounds through a range of art forms. More importantly, it's about bringing people who are not artists into the picture. Creativity itself should not be limited to a particular art form, but how can we bring in engineers, designers, teachers, social workers to embrace the arts as a channel of fostering social inclusion. And last but not least, we love advocacy, and we see the arts as a very right platform to promote that kind of self-advocacy with the kids. I'm sure many of you know this diagram. The Singapore school system is toying within segregation and integration, but the arts itself has a very big space for us to actually play around with inclusion. Because why? It's not a place, it's not a set of strategies. It's really about people coming together with active commitment to ensure that every child is engaged. And the relevance of our work, really, the foundation I work for conducted a survey in 2016. We found that 7 in 10 Singaporeans are okay with special needs people in their midst. Just don't sit next to me. That 1 in 10, only 1 in 10 Singaporeans have the courage to work with kids with special needs. I'm very proud to say that after our captain's program, all of them become that 1 in 10 and bring their knowledge back to their own community. So I think we also came up with this idea of, I'm normal, you're normal, why should we care about inclusion? So we draw a lot of learnings from Kindergarten, Singapore's first inclusive preschool that's built by the foundation. This is a link to a documentary we did on it. We also draw a lot of inspiration from overseas visits as part of my work in early childhood development on how Finland, for example, supports all kinds of learners. When we talk about it in the arts, I like Dr. Alice Fox's definition of it, that it's really a mutually beneficial exchange that results in high-quality art experiences. How we work it is really, there's a lot of training, planning, and intentional instruction. We do a lot of scaffolding during the events, and at the end of it, it's really about reflection and advocacy. Due to the lack of time, I will just skim through a sense of how we work. A lot of our training focuses on setting goals, program goals, space goals, team goals, and personal goals. The 10 things we do before we do anything as an inclusive arts movement is really about one thing, relationship building. And then it goes on to things like program goals, where we decide how we want to work in a space, working with a team, and lastly, coming up with your personal goals. So I think with that, I would really like to end off highlighting that for us, the engine of Superhero Me really boils down to one thing, our captains. At the end of it, we are not a venue, we are not a program, but we're a community hoping to impart this whole idea of togetherness, of courage, really to drum up that sense of social advocacy that inclusion should not be something only advocated for by the disabled. So with that, I think I'll end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Jean.
The blinking.
You can hear her supersonically speaking very, very quickly. I shared with you earlier about changing, reframing ways of thinking, ways of seeing, and ways of knowing. And my privilege to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Lucy Bolger. Lucy is the academic coordinator for the Creative Arts Therapies Research Unit, CATRU. And she brings 12 years of experience in creative arts therapy training, research, and practice into her current role at CATRU. And in her interdisciplinary work for contemporary music theory, intercultural learning experiences, I'm very pleased to introduce that she is really one powerhouse on music therapy for collaboration, notions of power, participation, and sustainability. Lucy has multiple peer-reviewed journal articles in this area of study. She is currently the chair of the Ethics Committee for the Australian Music Therapy Association and a member of the Research and Ethics Committee for the World Federation of Music Therapy. So here's Dynamo Lucy Bolger.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that introduction, and thank you very much for this very kind invitation to come and speak to you here in Singapore. It's my first visit to Singapore, and it's been wonderful so far to hear not only around arts engagement and inclusion, but also just a little bit more about Singaporean culture as well. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of my role at the University of Melbourne, and I have got a roving mic because I do tend to move as I talk, so hopefully that will be easy enough to follow. But I'm going to speak a little bit about social inclusion and access through music therapy, which is the area of the arts that I'm involved in, and from my perspective as a lecturer at the University of Melbourne. So to give you some context, thanks to Rimi, who earlier gave you some of the cultural context for the University of Melbourne at Melbourne University, I work in the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. So the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music is located in I guess we call it the arts hub of Melbourne, quite close into the city, where we have a number of our cultural institutions, such as the National Gallery of Victoria and the Melbourne Arts Centre. And as Remy indicated, there are some really complex power dynamics and cultural access dynamics that are associated with being in this space. But it also offers a lot of opportunities. So I work in the Fine Arts and Music faculty, is located right here in amidst some of our most dynamic and well-funded arts institutions in Melbourne. And it is a training ground for a lot of our premier arts and music and drama and theatre and photography experts across our disciplines. So, within that very privileged space, what is it that we do? I'd just like to introduce my team. So there are quite a number of us, and there are 3 missing, but this was the most comprehensive photo that I could find. So amongst our team, we have people who are specialising in teaching and learning, some who specialise in research, and all of us who are engaged in engagement activities where we engage outwards with the community. So what I thought I would do is share the 3 strands of the university's work, which come across these 3 areas of teaching and learning, research and engagement, and talk about the ways that we as a music therapy department at the university are using our platform at the university to explore inclusion and access from the perspective of music therapy, which is our discipline. So the primary way that we engage is through the Masters of Music Therapy. So that in itself, we have an on-campus Masters, it's a Masters of Music Therapy, where people come to the university to learn in a very, I guess, the mainstream mode of tertiary learning in Australia. We also have a blended learning model, which allows people to learn from other parts of Australia. Australia is a very large country, somewhat different to Singapore in that respect, but it does mean that for people who live in other parts of the country, it can be complex if the place that you would like to learn is not the city that you live in. So we offer a blended learning model to allow for that for our students. And we also have an international blended learning model for students from Hong Kong who would like to study with us, where we, instead of them coming for intensive learning experiences in Melbourne, we ourselves go to Hong Kong to do that learning. As well as that, we have a research unit where we're very interested in both graduate level research, which is PhD study, and our staff research, and we engage in participatory research through our music therapy lab. So I'll share a little bit about that. And I'll also offer a couple of examples of some engagement work that we've done, projects and partnerships. And the specific example that I'll share is a partnership that I've been involved in with the National Gallery of Victoria, where our music therapy students work together with community groups from underprivileged schools who are coming to the gallery to learn about Van Gogh in this case. But for those of you who perhaps haven't come across music therapy before, music therapy is one of the many amazing ways that our arts, I guess we would call it the arts and health space in Australia. So music therapy is one way that we do that. There's also community art, there's drama therapy, there's community theatre. There's lots of different ways that people are engaging in this space. So I'm just sharing the one space that is my expertise here. But I've used the definition that I am offering for you here is from the Singaporean Association of Music Therapy, because I figure that is probably the most appropriate for you to be thinking about. But essentially what music therapists do is that we use music as a tool to support the health and wellbeing outcomes, to facilitate health and wellbeing outcomes that are chosen by people that we work with. Across areas of emotional, social, cognitive, physical development, and across the areas of education, health, later life and community settings. So it's quite a diverse, I guess, umbrella. The scope of our practice is quite diverse, but then the way that we actually enact that practice varies depending on our skills and our interest across the sector. So I'm just going to talk about inclusion and access at the university in the area of music therapy. So when we're training in our teaching and learning stream of the university, we explore inclusion and access essentially through the theory that we're sharing with students. So there's quite a high priority for us in supporting students to have an inclusive agenda in the way that they're thinking about their work. Because contemporary music therapy theory is quite strongly informed by ideas from the Declaration of Human Rights, in particular Article 27, which I'm sure many of you are very interested in and aware of, the idea that everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of community and to enjoy the arts and to share the scientific advancement and its benefits. And why that article is so important is that for some people in our society, in Australia, their particular set of needs means that they're not as able to access those human rights without perhaps some additional supports or some additional opportunities or some additional, I guess, tools that can support that. So what we think about when we're supporting students to train is what kind of needs might the people that we work with have, and how might we be able to use our skills to support them for those needs to be met so that they can enact their human rights as a consumer of art and a participant in the arts in Australia. And when we think about inclusion and access in our research, we tend to explore it in a few different ways. So we do have participatory research practices where we work we do co-research with the people in our community. Alongside that, we also have community partnerships and linkages, which is when we might work together with a community organisation to support them to engage with music in their community. And the third way is the investigating techniques to advance inclusion. So I've got an example of this which I'd like to share, which is where we're looking at using virtual reality experiences for people who have very high spinal cord injuries to be able to engage in community music activities together from the privacy of their homes, because they're physically in the large space of Australia not able to come into a shared space. So we're creating shared spaces in the virtual world for people to come together. And also we have the Music Therapy Lab, which is an on-campus space where we're trying to make the university itself accessible to external partners. So I'd love to just quickly play a 1-minute video. I'm conscious there's 2 minutes left, but I think this will be worth playing. So can we play the 1-minute video to just demonstrate this?
National Disability Awards will be presented in 6 categories in Canberra tonight, including those who are using cutting-edge technology to help people living with disability. Social Affairs correspondent Norman Hermont met 2 of the finalists.
Singing together through virtual reality and helping people living with quadriplegia.
And he sang as he watched, waited till he's Billy Boy.
This prototype at the University of Melbourne lets singers get together virtually without leaving home. Singing develops muscles people with quadriplegia need to breathe more easily.
They can just put on the headphones and then be transported to a campfire with some other people sitting around, and we can sing together.
No, leave the campfire. I like the campfire. Yeah, leave that.
Participants can choose the setting they want. This VR, they say, is making a big difference.
With spinal cord injury, you're prone to have breathing difficulties, and it's definitely assisted in helping me overcome them.
So I've only got 45 seconds left, so just think it's sometimes more helpful to see these kinds of things illustrated in practice. So this is one example of how we're trying to use our skills and knowledge in promoting health through music to facilitate access for people who otherwise wouldn't have it. Another way that we're doing that is bringing in groups of underprivileged youth to come into the university, young people who perhaps don't have family members who are involved in tertiary education, and to experience songwriting within our music therapy lab as a part of our community engagement so that they can explore, just become familiar and comfortable with that space so that they might consider pursuing those kinds of opportunities in the future for themselves. And I will have to leave it there, and share with you in the break if you're interested in knowing more about our Inclusion and Access program with the National Gallery of Victoria. Thanks so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Lucy. Well done. Thank you so much for looking at shared cultural spaces that are inclusive and that's open. And today I'd like to introduce to you another friend that I reconnected with. Izan is another dynamo, a woman who believes that she can change the creative space within KL. Izan Satrina Muhammad Salehuddin is the founder of CENDANA. CENDANA is Culture Economy Development Agency. It's a grounds-up initiative by herself, and prior to setting up CENDANA, Izan led one of Malaysia's leading culture creative industries development organizations. Just recently this year in February, she hosted the whole team of young Arts for Good, young artists in KL under Singapore International Foundation. And the Arts for Good, which I work very closely with, she really extended her generosity and hospitality to talk about sustainability in youth leadership and how can you provide accessibility in the arts in different domains and challenges. Izan was the former board director of the KL Benali Committee of the National Visual Arts Gallery, Performing Arts Committee member for the National Creative Industry Policy Group. She's the catalyst, committee observer, and facilitator for the Royal Arts Gala Fund Selection Panel. More illustriously, she also serves on the evaluation panel for the INSO Arts Fund and is currently the council member of the Global Entrepreneurship, Movement and Arts, Life Festival and Events Association. But in her words, it takes a whole village to create social change. Izan, please.
Hi, everybody. I feel like this afternoon is a bit serious. Is everyone okay? Well, could I just ask the technical team to perhaps switch off my Wi-Fi? I think the sound, the email coming in is coming from my laptop. Yeah? Oh, okay. So before that, I'm glad I'm behind a rostrum because I have this bad habit of shaking my leg every time I give a little talk. And even though I've worked with the Singapore Tourism Board for 7 years, and I'm a retired dancer, I still get nervous. So very quickly, I'd like to thank the organizers who have invited me to be here today with such a distinguished panel. And also a very quick shout out to our friends in the National Arts Council Singapore, Rosa's team, who has been kind enough to arrange some meetings for us when we were here the last time. So, Friends of the Arts. Whilst Malaysia may not have been listed for its own cendol by CNN, a shift of regime took place recently in Malaysia. As you may all know, a coalition that has ruled Malaysia for all of 61 years has since then lost power, and the nation is now led by the Pakatan Harapan, or Alliance of Hope government. Our Prime Minister, this 93-year-old Honorable Tun Mahathir Mohamad, who was previously the Barisan National Prime Minister for 22 years, has now returned and become the world's oldest sitting elected leader. And on the other side of the coin, we also have the youngest cabinet minister, Syed Saddiq, who is the youngest minister in Asia. Now, in its 6 months, our new government has pledged to institutional reforms. That is, after all, the premise of this change. People power has made this historical moment. But where is the change of the arts reform in Malaysia? And forgive me for talking about this a bit more because it provides a different perspective to today's discussion. You see, Malaysia is absolutely rich in history, culture, colors, and stories. With a multi-ethnic, multi-religion, multi-languages, there is much diversity related to today's panel to be celebrated in Malaysia. My brief today touches on how cultural institutions advocate for the arts and culture in their own communities, cities, states, or country. Whilst people power is also important in arts and culture, Malaysia is at a stage where it is still trying to make sense of an incomplete ecosystem. This includes a funding system that is not necessarily sustainable, public-private partnerships and initiatives that takes place on an ad hoc basis without a long-term outlook, and possibly, some may say, a lack in a long-term strategy to develop arts and culture for the benefit of our art society, be it the general public or the marginalized. Arts in Malaysia at the moment today perhaps has little importance to the overall agenda of the government, as it currently focuses on cutting down costs, getting back our money from the 1MDB fiasco, and this is quite evident in the recent budget announcement. So where shall we start? We start by acknowledging that maybe the arts is a minority community in the larger context of Malaysia's society at the moment, but one that has ample opportunity to be inclusive in narrating the stories of both sides of the coins with arts as its medium. Some of our efforts in bringing arts closer to the communities and the wider public includes public arts programming in a monthly curated platform called Rio, which a video is now playing. Sorry, I muted it so I could just also talk over it. And also on the right, we also have monthly public arts performances that showcases the Mak Yongs, the Menoras, the band Kuda Kepang, and that will all take place in Kuala Lumpur starting January. Another initiative undertaken by CENDANA is Our Arts in the City, which is placed in highly trafficked areas in parts of Kuala Lumpur as a form of increasing awareness, and it was only recently launched in November. We organized a nationwide call, and we received more than 1,000 submissions, of which was selected to 14 artworks. And it was placed on buildings and LED screens to layer some vibrancy around the city, which is otherwise quite predictable. In a short 3 weeks since the artworks have gone up, curious humans and corporates have approached us to inquire about purchasing these artworks. These works are visible when one looks up to the buildings, in addition to being layered with different activities, like promoting the independent artists that are on the videos on the Arts Expo. Of course, the monthly performances that I mentioned earlier on. We also have the regional mentoring program that's in collaboration with our art projects, a visual art forum, which is in collaboration with Rogue Art, and a pop-up independent visual art fair that will take place in March. In another lens, this can be seen as a form of democratizing arts and providing accessibility to the people of all walks of life, be it the professionals, artists, curators, producers, but also the wider public, who are perhaps wealthy or otherwise. And this is all done collectively to also influence our politicians who are controlling the money at the moment for the arts as well. So this is another angle I feel that is important, where it really goes back to what Rebecca was sharing earlier on, that it takes a whole village to really raise awareness about the diverse communities, and then also look into the accessibility we try to provide for them. So these were just some of the visuals for the additional layering of programming. But I'd like also to offer another perspective, where we've seen examples of immersive dance taking stage to create awareness on the subject of human trafficking. And this was done by Terry and the Cuz, a Malaysian group, and they did it with an NGO called Tenaga Nita. And Tenaga Nita, sorry, I'm just panting, I really don't know why. Probably because I'm nervous. All right. So Tenaganita looks at protecting and promoting the rights of women, migrants, and refugees. And the show entitled Skin was really edgy and bold, and saw the show receiving both positive reviews as well as negative remarks for supposedly exploiting the issues of refugees. So I'm just going to read a quote from that said article. Exploiting the issues of refugees. Okay. Thank you, Therapies, for your production. It made me incredibly angry. I was curious about my anger, which on the night I could not express coherently. Allow me now to clarify my negative emotions. Exploiting the issues of refugees was the first argument to appear in my mind right after the show. I continued generating other ideas to explain my anger, using the sorrow of others for your own intellectual satisfaction. The glorification of your own privilege to discuss something about someone who has no choice, and making fun of the pain of others. I think it is crucial to criticize productions which market their own work using trendy social issues. This is what I call exploitation, highlighting the issues of human trafficking, slavery, and refugees, as it was done, did not really create awareness. It merely provoked curiosity by using the pain and sadness of others as a kind of spectacle. It ended up just being propaganda, avoiding any serious debate about the issue. But nevertheless, they have sort of rectified some of these concerns, and they have been touring. The show has been touring to Adelaide, Georgetown, Penang, Bendigo, Melbourne, Darwin, and also be setting up a show next year in United Kingdom. So I have one more minute. I talked so fast. So I'm just going to leave you with a video, but I really wanted to share with you those points that are from an institution's perspective, and the point of also not just us playing a role, but other artists and parts of the community who are also trying to create awareness of these diverse and marginalized communities as well, and how they are also equally important in playing that role. So I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope to take questions later. So.
Art is alive.
Art is rich.
Art can make you feel like nothing else.
Art is an engine to drive the nation forward. Art pushes people to gather and celebrate, to invest their energy in brand new ways.
And to invest in Malaysian art is to invest in us. Art is our gorgeous history and our bright future. CENDANA pushes us forward. And from here, we rise.
Thank you. Thank you, Izan, and for sharing CENDANA's vision and aspiration and hope. Thank you for giving confidence and bravery to a lot of people in the community that you work with. I'd like to introduce to you, some of it, Rachelle may not be new to you, and she is working as the head of venues and program management at Esplanade Theatres on the Bay. I'd like to share that for Rachelle, it's been many years of really working in the culture sector. She's the Secretary General of the Association of the Asia Pacific Performing Arts Centre, APAC, the largest network of arts venues, festivals, and related organizations in the Asia Pacific region. And before joining the Esplanade, Rachelle was at the National Arts Council too, where she undertook arts policy reviews and formulation, as well as strategic planning. And on the personal front, Rachelle was one of the first few people when I was heading up as a founding principal of SOTA. She helped to write and design the first few papers for the Cabinet's review to start a specialized arts school in Singapore. Rachelle Tan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So if you heard any of that, you would know that I am not the most qualified person here to talk about accessibility. So I'm glad that my colleague Grace Lowe will be here tomorrow so that she can share with you firsthand some of the very positive impact and the meaningful work that she has been doing in community engagement. And I'm also glad that there are many other distinguished speakers here today at this conference that I can learn from. But Tangam and the lovely team at Cultural Academy are impossible to say no to. So here I am today. And I'm very happy to share my thoughts with you on this topic, as well as to share with you from the Esplanade's perspective how we make arts and culture accessible to everyone. As I started thinking more about this topic, I realized what a big word accessibility is. In our industry, when we say that a program is accessible, we usually mean that it's popular or that it's mainstream. But just because it is doesn't mean that it's of quality or that I can afford it. Sometimes it's used very specifically for programs with, for people with special needs. So today, we know that performances can be audio described, relaxed or sensory friendly, signed, closed caption, or even come with touch tours. Even venues have been calling themselves accessible. And they describe themselves as being friendly to wheelchairs, guide dogs, children, families. Some venues are even dementia-friendly and friendly to breastfeeding. And so I have structured my thoughts and organized everything into 4 points, A, B, C, D. Very easy, mostly for me to remember. First, accessibility is at the heart of Esplanade. Our vision has always been to be a performing arts center for everyone. We believe in making the arts accessible, and we are driven by our mission to entertain, engage, educate, and inspire through the arts. We have hosted over 41,000 shows and welcomed 28 million people through our doors. It has been 16 years and counting. And as our facilities age and society's needs change, we are constantly looking to improve on our spaces and services. Our venues are wheelchair-friendly, guide dog-friendly, and there's an accessibility guide on our website that you can download. In 2016, we converted an underutilized foyer space on level 4 into Pip's Playbox. This is a dedicated space for children and their families with many interactive activities, including storytelling sessions, craft and reading corners, and an outdoor play area. In the same year, we installed tactile floor markings to help the visually impaired. Earlier this year, we also installed handrails to provide stability and support as people walk through the concourse steps. And because everyone matters and every role plays a part, every staff at Esplanade undergoes the Esplanade Experience training on how we engage with our patrons, visitors, donors, advocates, and other stakeholders, as well as ongoing learning and development. Last year, the Esplanade Experience was extended to over 300 front of house and technical production casuals, and just last month, we had a staff talk on awareness on individuals with autism and ADHD. We also learned from our friends in the arts and cultural sector, and we are part of the Arts Access Hub, which Paul here has been very passionate and very inspired in championing. B, building blocks of Esplanade's program. In line with our vision to be a performing arts center for everyone, our diverse range of programs encompass music, dance, theater, and visual arts with a special focus on community access and arts education. We ensure that there's always something for everyone to enjoy. Together with our hirers and partners, we present more than 3,500 programs and activities a year. And amazingly, and you may not know this, more than 70% of that is free and of very good quality. With more than 14 festivals and series, we also actively program intergenerational and family-friendly programs in all our festivals and our cultural festivals, in particular, encourage cross-cultural knowledge and interaction. Some of our programs also reflect our desire for more inclusion and diversity. We introduced sensory-friendly performances for children with special needs in 2016 through shows that are staged at this very venue. We also reach out and collaborate with various communities in the creative process. As part of our free program series, Red Dot August this year, we presented Theatre in the Dark, a play that is written by and performed by the visually impaired in the dark in the Annex Studio. and these are with players from Dialogue in the Dark. Last year, we also co-curated and created an exhibition called Creating a Home Away from Home, featuring objects from our migrant worker community with various community partners. And this was a very special exhibition because they brought with them objects that meant very special, that had very special meaning to them. And they were very proud when it was exhibited at the Esplanade and that they could tell their story together with the objects. Although we have song signing and closed captioning in some, not all of our programs, as the National Arts Centre, together with our artists, we must continue to find ways to challenge how we think about performance and how we think about our audience. Sorry, I'm not sure why. Sorry about that. I think the video is playing prematurely, so I'll just skip on to the rest of my presentation before I get on to the video. In addition, one of the basic principles that every programmer learns at the Esplanade is on ticket pricing. We push the top category to what the market can afford, but the lowest category must always be what the community can afford, which is why every program at the Esplanade always has a range of ticket prices and that we have also booking specials for schools. Can I just skip to C, community. Engagement and ownership is key. We cannot do it alone. So to keep more than 70% of our programs free and to offer the rest at subsidized prices, we must thank the generous support of MCCY and Tote Board. As a not-for-profit organization, we are also deeply grateful to our sponsors and donors. It is also with their support that we were able to set up a dedicated community engagement unit in 2014. And today, they organize more than 500 activities and touch the lives of more than 10,000 beneficiaries in Singapore. And these include seniors, children, youths, and those with special needs. And Grace will share more with you tomorrow, but I was particularly moved by a dementia project that they did. And this is because my family has been grappling with that issue for a long time now. And in this project, we could really see that the participants, those with dementia, were visibly happier. And through song learning and through singing, they were able to stimulate their brain activity. And their caregivers, who also participated in the workshop, were able to de-stress, they were able to enjoy themselves and find another way of connecting with their loved ones. And I know we've heard a lot about music therapy from Lucy today as well. D, my last point, digital. Technology has enabled us to create more access points and to go beyond our four walls. Esplanade Learn is where we share content on our website, and these can range from in-depth stories, videos, to interviews. It also has a resource page for educators and a listing of upcoming workshops and talks for if you're interested. And in October 2017, Esplanade launched the #MyDurian campaign. It's a year-long celebration of our 15th anniversary, comprising programs and activities that bring together people and stories that have helped to shape the Durian, as we are fondly known as. I would like to share with you a video of Clara, who won a specially curated experience at Esplanade with her Instagram post where she used the #MyDurian and shared her love of her ballet with her mother, and they were both here to attend a ballet workshop for the first time. Could you help me to play the video, please? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Clara, winner of the #MyDurian September experience, and today I'm going to have lunch with the wonderful Muna. Yay!
Hi, I'm Muna and I'm here for the #MyDurian experience, and I'm going to have lunch with Clara and her mother at Noosh.
My mom and I went for a footwork workshop last month and we really enjoyed it, so I want to share the experience with my friends on Instagram. So I was just like, okay, I'll #MyDurian.
I think one of my fondest memories would always be doing productions here at Esplanade. I don't know why, but it just feels like home. This is where I got to do many firsts. Like one of the first few productions I've ever been in was at the Esplanade Theatre Studio, and that was such a big deal to me. And
over the years, I just feel like any way that I can be involved in the Esplanade, I would love to. The Esplanade definitely has a special place in my heart lah. So yeah. Aww.
So we're just beginning to explore more digital tools to enrich the visit experience by connecting the online and the offline together. And in particular, we hope to enable and introduce accessibility features such as closed captioning and subtitling on mobile devices for our programs. In concluding my sharing, I would like to add that as cultural workers and leaders, we must do what we need. We must do what we can to ensure that the arts can be accessed by everyone. I know I'm preaching to the converted here in this room, but it must be said that our motivations cannot be to sell one more ticket, or it's because it's MCCY's KPI, but because we truly believe that the arts matter, and it's instrumental to our ability to lead fulfilling and enriching lives. Selfishly speaking, I know that I must play my part today, because that old woman who is forgetful and hard of hearing at the concert hall might just be me someday. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachelle. Rachelle had hoped for everyone to have access to the arts and to experience firsthand how the arts and culture feed in the fullness of our being, especially when today's economically progressive and yet increasing uncertain and violent world. I share these thoughts with you, and I appreciate what you have shared. And in this space, when Paul will be leading us into, he will give us an experiential experience. It's a different way of looking at a panel discussion. Paul Adams, can I please first introduce you properly? He comes from the Singapore Repertory Theatre, SRT, as a full-time learning and management engagement manager. Paul joined SRT from Manchester, UK, after spending 10 years in the theatre industry, working for leading charities and commercial theatre companies. Right in Singapore, Paul is also known for the Access Arts Hub as the driving force and the team. The Access Arts Hub is a consortium of organizations and individuals championing better access to arts for persons with disabilities. So I know he needs a lot of time. So Paul, away you go. Thank you.
Cool.
Paul
Thank you very
Adams,
much. Yeah, nice to meet everybody, and it's an absolute privilege to be here to share this panel with you guys and to speak at the event today. So we'll kick straight into my keynote. Am I in charge? I'm in charge, okay. So I'm wearing two hats today. I won't go into them in absolute detail, but so the question that I want to pose is, what happens when disability disappears? Okay? And I'm approaching accessibility today in terms of making arts programming accessible for persons with disability in particular. And you can see that you'll recognize lots of those icons up there. So I think holding on to that idea of disability disappearing is really important, because as we're going to go through the keynote and talk and experience today, actually, if we get rid of this idea of a label of disability and start to enable in different ways, we can actually get rid of this and move forward quite interestingly. So there's two places that I sit. SRT, I'm the learning manager, so I look after all the participatory programs, and I'm also the member and advocate of the Access Arts Hub, which is a new consortium of people volunteering their time to move accessibility forward. We've got a pretty cool logo that we got designed there. But I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to come to the screen just so I can see it properly. So my name's Paul Adams. I'm a 32-year-old Caucasian man from a town called Oldham in England. My accent is from Lancashire. I'm trained in performance and I work for many arts organisations in the UK. I'm a teaching artist and arts manager by profession. I'm 5'8" tall. I'm probably exaggerating slightly. I have small blue eyes, short brown hair, combed to the right, and short facial hair. I love theatre, integrating arts in education and advocating access for all. I am a friendly, welcoming person who likes a cold beer and good food. Hence, I'm a little round in the face and the waist. I'm wearing a dark blue shirt. My top button's open. My sleeves are rolled to my elbow. Navy blue office trousers and blue shoes with white soles. I share that with you because I've got an interesting journey this last week in audio description and actually supporting people who are vision impaired or blind to access arts programming. And we're going to look at that a little bit deeper in a moment. So filling in those gaps for you, hopefully you get a little bit more of a personality of who I am, but also it would help someone who's in the audience today who might not be able to see me so clearly. So when you start your journey to access, these are the questions I ask myself and people ask me. I'm not going to go through them all, But you can see things on there. What is access? I hear that all the time. And as we know, it's quite a diverse term. We hear lots of things around what happens if my patron is blind or partially sighted. We hear this a lot. What will access cost me? Okay, so when we start talking about how we make our arts program, our cultural program accessible, these are all very valid questions. And the beautiful thing about all those questions is you can move beyond them and you can achieve all of them. So just so, I know lots of people will know this model, but we are working very much in the social model, okay? So I just put a very clear example up there. Charity model, let's donate some money to support children with learning disabilities to watch a musical as they may not be able to afford it. Okay, so this is a sense of giving, which is important, but it's giving because we think maybe someone can't or can't access, they are less of in some way. Within the medical model, because of their diverse impairments, children will be able to sit and watch the musical. So because of their impairment, it's not possible for them to sit for the full length of the musical without having to move or get about. But within a social model, if we provide a relaxed performance, all children can attend. And I wrote there, disability disappears at that point. So for those who may not know, but a relaxed performance is something that's happening quite a lot in Singapore. This year we had the curious incident of the dog in the night time here at the Esplanade, which was fantastic. We did a relaxed performance. And there's other relaxed performances happening across the Esplanade's program with their playtime. And also recently at SRT, we did one for our show Nursery Crimes. And basically that is making very simple adjustments in terms of lighting and sound in order for people to come and watch this show who might not normally be able to. So if you have sensory sensitivities, loud sound, strobe lighting, we're able to remove them to allow you to have that access. Now this program makes disability disappear. What I want to do right now is just demonstrate access in action. So if we could drop all the lights down to as dark as possible, please, technicians. And have we got the lights down? They're all scrambling now. Quick, he's causing problems asking to turn lights off. Thank you.
My grandmother's sister, my great-aunt, was sent from Guangdong province in China to Singapore with a cardboard suitcase holding rice for the journey, a photograph of the family she was supporting back home, and her red cloth cap and blue Sanfu uniform. She was a samsui, cheap labor in the British time after the war. Carting bricks for 40 cents a day, my great-aunt embraced frugal spinsterhood, living simply, 4 to a room, sleeping in a hammock, and sending back whatever she could. Or so the official story goes, the one we Singaporeans all know. Toiling like a snail on the construction site, my great-aunt became so bent from carrying bricks that her bones began to bend and relearned their shape. No longer able to unbend, a permanent physical impairment. Her posture reflected her lowly station in life, unable to straighten and look others in the eye, a lifetime of scouring the ground. "Do not pity me," she said. "你千祈冇可憐我啊！雖然我頭耷耷，去到淡水度，起到河面度，仲睇到藍天，仲睇到白雲，有時地下仲有金針添。" Or at least that's what I tell myself, creating defiant words for a woman that I never knew but whose genes I shared. She did not pity herself, nor would she take others' pity. She was proud, my grandmother said, proud of her achievements, of the resilience of her damaged body that supported the family back home. 又塵又肥, damaged, useless. No. She is my touchstone, one of the disabled ancestors our city is built on. Thousands upon thousands, scar upon scar.
And could we have the lights up, please? Brilliant. So I'm sure you'll agree that listening to that was quite interesting, but we had no idea who this person is. We couldn't see them, and there was lots of things that were happening. So just to close the presentation, we're going to see it one more time. So this is Grace. Grace Cooley is an actor, producer, and applied theatre practitioner. Today she is performing an extract from And Suddenly I Disappear, written by Kate O'Reilly. She is a nameless character representing a figure telling us a story. The nameless character is wearing all black, head to toe. And we'll start again. Lights come up. We hear a Cantonese lullaby. She walks and places the chair to the left. She turns and faces the audience.
My grandmother's sister, my great aunt, was sent from Guangdong province in China to Singapore with a cardboard suitcase holding rice for the journey, a photograph of the family she was supporting back home.
She mimes the clothes that she's talking about.
And her great red cloth cap and blue samfu uniform. She was a samsui, cheap labor in the British time after the war. Carting bricks for 40 cents a day, my great aunt embraced frugal spinsterhood, living simply 4 to a room, sleeping in a hammock, and sending whatever she could to the family back home. Or so the official story goes, the one we Singaporeans all know.
She hunches her shoulders, becoming frail in appearance.
Toiling like a snail on the construction site, my great aunt became so bent from carrying bricks that her bones relearned their shape and became hunched, doubled over.
She sits.
A permanent physical impairment, no longer able to unbend. Her lowly posture reflected her station in life, unable to straighten and look others in the eye, a lifetime of scouring the ground. Do not pity me, she said.
She becomes grandma, stooping forward and pointing a sharp finger.
你千祈冇可憐我啊！雖然我頭耷耷，去到騰水度，去到河面度，仲睇到藍天，仲睇到白雲，有時地下仲有監察添。
She sits up straight.
Or at least that's what I tell myself, creating defiant words for a woman that I've never knew but whose genes I shared. She did not pity herself, nor would she take others' pity. She was proud of her achievements, my grandmother said. Proud of the resilience of her damaged body that sustained the family back home.
She adjusts her posture again.
Hey, 又殘又肥, damaged, useless.
She stands.
No. She's my touchstone. One of the disabled ancestors our city is built on.
She glances over her shoulder, recognizing faces.
Thousands upon thousands, scar upon scar.
Ladies and gentlemen, Grace Cooley, thank you very much. I'm well over, so I will stop there. Just to say that next year SRT are committing to audio describe 6 performances in our programme, but please do grab me about that. Sorry for running over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Grace. The arts and accessibility, it's moving, Grace. From a person who came from a family from Saigo Lane, when it's audio described, it touches you in a different way because you talk about lived and shared experience. You access memories because it's shared experience. Cycle Lane for us is an inner city and it was very deprived. And for us, for me as a family, we came through not because of the arts in Cantonese opera, for my family, but through education. And now I'd like to bring the panel back to some of the things that I'm very concerned as an educator. For yourselves, in giving accessibility, what has been the most transformative thing that you have experienced yourself when you're working with your communities? And perhaps, can I please first ask Lucy Bolger, in your work with the intersections between hospital work, teachers, educators, academics, and research, what has been the most powerful and transformative that made a difference for you in music therapy and accessibility in the arts?
Okay, that's a big question. Okay, everyone can hear me, yes? I think I've been very lucky to work across a variety of contexts with many different people with lots of different strengths. And I think one of the most transformative experiences for me was moving to work in a different culture that wasn't my own. I went to work in Bangladesh for a while, which in a place where I was quite different to a lot of other people. So I think the difference between the experience of being quite different and in a different place meant that there was a lot I had to learn from the people around me. So a lot of my best teachers were people who had quite a lot of disadvantage themselves, but in that situation, they had a lot of the knowledge and skills that I didn't have and were able to show and teach me. And it took my experience of being a learner and learning from people with lots of different abilities to a very new level.
And very interestingly, the dynamics of power becomes in the participation, it turns around.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. And maybe you can share a bit more what happened at the National Gallery work that you did recently.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So the National Gallery work was the Gallery of Victoria has a program where they bring school students from schools with not a lot of resources who are perhaps quite far away from the urban centre of Melbourne, and they would bring them to the gallery to take them through, to show them the exhibition and then to do some workshops with them. And they approached us to say, we'd like these guys to have the chance to explore the art in different ways, and they asked us if we could help with that. And so we brought our music therapy students to the gallery, and our students ran music workshops. So we had some different artworks, and we did some music workshops in response to this high art. And we used kind of music techniques like creating a radio play, sound play, trying to get inside of the characters of those different pieces of artwork to see what these young people's musical interpretation of that art experience, that art was. Another one was that we did a songwriting activity where they positioned themselves from the position of the person in the art, and we're talking about who they were, and we used the music as a kind of vehicle for them to just get inside of these high art experiences in a bit more of a interactive way. And it was good for the young people, I think, to have a chance to explore the art, but it was also really great for our students. So there was a mutual learning that happened there. It wasn't a very one-sided experience. Our students certainly got as much from that experience as the young people involved in the program. And I think that kind of mutual intent doesn't always work, but having an intent to be mutual in the way that we engage with people is really critical in the accessibility space. That it's really, the people with a disability, they are the experts in what it means to have a disability. So they have expertise we don't have, and that's something that we can learn from.
Wow. When you talk about participation, and also on the other side, curating what is for those whom you deem as underserved, the choices that you make. I'd like to pose that question to Rachelle. Earlier on, I asked her, what guides your approach to deciding who are the underserved? It's a vibrant program out there, the Esplanade, every weekend. It's facing the youth, and it's really booming, and it's grungy. What deems your accessibility to that group of people, and what did you decide, and the programming that decides from the indoor theatres that you have? Rachelle?
So we always say that our mission is to be a performing arts center for everyone. And we do that through so many things that we do. We have more than 3,500 activities a year. So we always say there must be something here for you. And so some of it is very broad strokes. We have family-friendly festivals, cross-cultural festivals, genre-specific festivals. And in the festivals itself, there are ticketed programs, there are non-ticketed programs. This week we start Voices, and that is a festival about singing. And anyone can sing, and everyone sings. Well, whether you sing well or you're a bathroom singer is another thing altogether, but you must enjoy singing. And you can attend a workshop for as little as $6. So I think it's difficult to, but I mean, we all have priorities and there are limited resources. So I have to say that we have a very dedicated team of programmers that really look into their own areas and in how in using the arts you can reach out to different people who come. And even who's not coming, and that's a question that we've been asking ourselves a lot as well, as much as we know we have millions of visitors a year. Who's not coming? How do we get them here? How do we bring the experience of the arts? Which is why I think my presentation was structured the way that it is, because we really do a lot of things, and if we can't reach them, because we can't bring them here, let's reach them digitally. Let's get them, let's share some of our stories, some of our insights, some of our videos on our website, and get them to just come and experience it for yourself or see for yourself.
There's a related question on Pigeonhole, actually. You can flash that out. It's active on my screen. While museums in SG are moving towards more senior-friendly and special needs-friendly programs, is there demand for these programs? How are the take-up rates? What are the intended audience benefiting from these programs? I guess what you shared just now about the Esplanade, the way you choose, looking at audience, the surveys that you have, you also decide who and what you want to program. Would you like to share a little bit more about what your take-up rates are for the senior citizens or senior-friendly programs?
Yeah, we have two specific programs that are for the seniors. Our coffee, morning, afternoon tea, it's very popular. Really, tickets are like, I think they get sold out like within the same day. And it's this really very cute bunch of auntie and uncles that come here and they enjoy themselves. It's all evergreen songs. And it's like $10, I think, for the ticket. And you can enjoy a coffee or a tea at Toast Box on us with the ticket. So it's very accessible, and those take-up rates are really good because we also have a dedicated festival called A Date with Friends, and that's targeted at seniors. The sensory-friendly programs are also very popular, and we were very proud to partner SRT when we did our first ever relaxed performance with The Curious Incident of a Dog in the Nighttime in the large theatre, and that was a very moving experience. It's a huge theatre. We were really frightened ourselves about having all these communities with special needs come, and how would they take to the show, and how would they relate to the space. And so we did everything, right, from guides to visual cues, the visual stories that we did to explain the story, even to like show them this is who you will encounter, this is an usher in a uniform. We did everything from, we removed the bells, you know, when you come for a show at Esplanade, you have this irritating bell that tells you ding, 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 the show's gonna start. We removed that because that might be a trigger for someone. Even like the hand blowers in the toilets. So there are these simple things that we got, you know, that we think about, and when we want to reach that community. So I think I also would borrow Professor Fleming, who says that your time will come. If we haven't reached you, if we haven't worked with your community, I think we will in time to come.
I am also curious with this question that has come up with 3 votes. It's a question for Izan. Communalism is entrenched in Malaysia's political and social systems. How do you see art, accessibility to art, being able to transcend those barriers? We talk about ways of seeing, ways of knowing, to overcome decades-old forms of discrimination. Your comments, please.
Well, that's a tough question, and I'm not a politician. Well, you know, when CENDANA was set up in 2017, we were set up under the former Prime Minister, who took a lot of interest in the arts and culture. And now we have Tun Mahathir coming back, who at his period of time was not really supportive of the arts. And at this point of time, some of the quotes and the senior officers are saying that, you know, arts is not desirable. If you want to have an easy job, do literature. And it's still the old way of thinking in the government. even though we have a lot of art advocates within the cabinet ministers. So it will take a long time. I'm still around in the arts ecosystem, and I advocate aggressively, not just in Parliament, meeting them on the side, meeting at the office, meeting in the evening, whatever it takes. But it's not an easy job. And because of that, a lot of the movements within the arts and culture communities, you are starting to see them reorganizing themselves and taking that responsibility on them to advocate directly. So again, it goes back to my story of it takes a whole village to really advocate for change, because even right now, the current government is going through a lot of the struggle because there are still old ways of doing things and how the current civil servants may not want to embrace change. So within the government system also, there's a lot of bad karma entrenched in it. And so we have to advocate to within this whole madness of trying to make sense how best to get the new government to support the arts. Yeah, I'll end it on that note first. Did I help answer that?
As much as you can, Izan. Thank you very
can.
much. You know, it reminds you of how, as an individual, you want to be passionate and build a small fire and light a fire, and then continue the dialogue in many ways to find intersections and then transform within the communities. And for that, I really take my hat off also to the work that Jean is currently doing. And Jean, we have one question that's up here. It says, perhaps I see accessibility as a means. What are the outcomes that your institutions hope to achieve? Social inclusion and mixing. And how do you know when you have achieved those outcomes? And for yourself, when you work with the children, and now with elder care and ordinary abled children, how do you go against age-old barriers and mental models and work from within the community and then go into a Lingkok Baru area?
I think we've always come from the perspective of advocacy, of using the arts as a way of advocacy. We feel the community arts can be very strong as a way for letting these kids develop their whole practice of being able to self-advocate. So it's no longer an able-bodied person speaking on your behalf, but what can you as a kid with disability actually communicate to another child in a room? I think that's really powerful. In terms of outcomes that we're looking for, it's really about responding to the fact that 5 in 10 Singaporean parents don't want a kid with special need in their classrooms because they think it will take away attention, the teacher's attention away from their own child. So I think it's a question we have to ask ourselves as, our society has these new fault lines. What are we hoping to do with the future? It's a big, big question, but essentially when you talk about inclusion and the fact that all children are comfortable with kids with disability and autism in a room, and they are very confident of hanging out with them like regular kids, it will be a very powerful someday, if all our Singaporean kids can be like that. So when we talk about outcomes, obviously we're not looking at, we can't change the system. We're an arts group. We can't say, hey, okay, let's put this kid into mainstream schools. But I think what we can do is to offer a platform on the social front to encourage parents and families to open up their minds, to understand that there are other social classes in Singapore, that there are other kinds of families out there. So I think that's the main outcome we're looking for. On the other hand, when we do training, the outcomes are more specific. Captains who go through our program answer questions on how their attitudes on inclusion has changed. Have they lost that fear of kids with special needs, and how they will go on to project this training in their work. So there are more specific measurements of that. But I would say largely it's about changing societal mindsets, and this takes a lot of time to do so.
And really taking a village to change mindsets over time. Yeah. And at this point, Paul, for yourself, there are 7 questions on the screen. They say
my
you need to
mic's
answer.
still.
Do you see the philosophy of relaxed performances being translatable into museum spaces as a means for performance with its myriad rules governing behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's happening. So the relaxed idea of relaxed performance is already got into galleries and museums in Singapore. They have them what they call a relaxed hour or a relaxed morning or a quiet hour where they, so some of the sensory sensitivities will be around the volume of traffic, the noise, the amount of people in one space at a time. So they're controlling the amount of people that come through their spaces within those hours or those mornings in order to have a relaxed environment. So that is happening. It comes with lots more tape around certain exhibition items, I believe, because obviously we have to be a little bit careful about how you might touch or interact with a certain item. So I know that there's been some great work happening around making sure that journeys are curated appropriately so that someone can go in and interact with, if not the specific item, a version of it that they're able to handle and get hands-on with. So you're seeing a lot of things that accompany relaxed performances, like touch tours. Rachelle mentioned this before. So getting hands-on with items, and I believe Singapore Art Museum have just launched their touch collection in order to allow people to go into the space and familiarize themselves with the work. So yeah, and I think that, I just wanted to touch on the conversations as well that with, it's got to be communal, it's got to be communicative, it's got to be collective, connected. It's got to be all those things. I'm very heartened to be in Singapore for coming up to 2 years, and the only way the agenda of accessibility in its very broadest sense, but obviously even very personal on my journey in terms of disability, the only way it moves forward is in collaboration. It's everyone working together to move things together as a shared voice, and I think that's how we get towards this idea of integration. And we've got to create these bridges for people to get to it, to get to that understanding. And I just wanted to point, I think Lucy, you mentioned as well, this idea of the voice of a disabled person. I think we also have to do as much as we can to not guess. We have to be led by people with disabilities. They have to be at the front of this conversation, and we should then listen and respond.
I'm fully with you on that. We had an opportunity where we had our senior teachers working with cerebral palsy young people, and they were in Jean's group. And the amount of time that we had to be silent, to wait for the child to respond, to be in that person's shoe, to make art with him or her, that is a real mental shift. Because usually when you teach in classrooms of 40 kids in one classroom, you would be multitasking all the way and working with every child. But when you sit and wait for that person to understand from his perspective, he is as able as I am. And I think that is where the work is, where the community is. I think the work in Singapore is nascent, let alone the capability building is to be started. And I'm very appreciative of this forum that we can participate together. There's one question I'd like to wrap up this whole forum with. I started about asking you, what was the most transformative? The authentic, the most meaningful, and the most powerful. So with my last few minutes, perhaps, Paul, you've just gone one round, we'll end with you again.
Okay.
So we go with Rachelle, Izan, Lucy, have some time to think again, and then for yourself to reframe, and then we'll come back to you, Paul. How about that?
Understood, yep, come.
Rachelle, the floor is yours.
Rebecca was just reminding me how old I am and how I moved from the ministry to the National Arts Council, and here I am now. And the reason why I moved was also because I wanted to see work, and I wanted to see people, and I wanted to see their faces. One of the things that we do at Esplanade is we have an executive on duty. It just means that every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and public holidays, you always have someone from the management's office on duty together with the operational staff. And it's a very meaningful day for us. It's not just about filing a report and reporting that the toilet wasn't working or that a pipe burst somewhere, but it's actually just seeing the people that come through. And there's so many different types of people that come through to the Esplanade, and they come here for different experiences. And everyone walks away with their own experience, how they associated themselves with us, with our programs, with our staff, with everything that they enjoy here. And that, for me, it's just, there's no one day or one program or one exhibition. It's really the privilege of working in this organization and having that with me all the time.
Thank you very much. Izan, Saya?
Yes. So I never continued being a professional dancer. I became an accountant instead. Counting money is my pastime, a part of my hobby. But I enjoy what I do now. I feel I'm in a position to advocate for the others who want to pursue and complete what they want to do and what they're passionate about in the arts. That's one. Two is that the recent launch of Art in the City, I met one of the artists whose artwork was exhibited around the city. And she was absolutely in tears because she felt for first time in her life, her parents were proud of her. And what they did is they drove around Kuala Lumpur to just take pictures of her work. Okay, I'll pass it to you first.
I think I might put it down because I think it will start to feed back to itself. Would you like to keep
Yeah,
it?
okay.
Keep it to show.
Thank you, I'm better now. So that's the artist side of me. But it was really a very moving experience. And if at every moment of my journey, I come across artists like that, I feel I am able to move a needle in the ecosystem, and I'm always encouraged to do more. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a part of yourself too.
I think there are so many experiences and relationships you become privileged to have when you do art with people, I think. And so I'm just going to give an example of one. What I think the most exciting thing about the art space with people is that people just always, they always surprise you in how far that they can take things and how much further they might take things than you even imagined, because their imagination is different to yours. And all these different people that we meet who have different realms of experience, their imaginations take the work together into very different places. And I think just an example of that is from the group of young people for who we work with in the music lab, who came into the university to do songwriting experiences. And I was a part of facilitating one aspect of that program. And one of the things that we were doing was to give these young people opportunities to be leaders that they could then put on their resume, so that when they went to get work, they had examples of how they had experienced leadership, because these kids perhaps didn't have access to many opportunities like that. So we were co-facilitating music songwriting workshops with corporate partners, and the young people had done some leadership training and were co-leading for us. And a really exciting moment for me was just stepping back and letting them lead a group of adults through a songwriting experience, all by them, really in quite not tokenistic ways. It's very much them doing their thing, their expertise in songwriting, and helping these adults to do that. And for me, it was just an example of that if we set high expectations for people in art to bring their power and their kind of capacity to an art project, then that does make their special needs disappear. And then they're just people whose actual capacities can shine.
Yep.
So that's what I think is really exciting about this space, and why art is such an obvious place for us to make accessibility happen in society.
Thank you.
I think for me, one of the most transformative things has been able to it's really the ability to grow from being just a community artist working with 15 children to working with creatives to lead an inclusive arts movement. The most beautiful thing is that we love working with people who are completely new to special needs. They have never encountered a single person with autism, with cerebral palsy. They don't know this part of Singapore exists, and there are many of them out there. I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to harness all that creative potential. If one can spend so much resources selling you an iPhone, why not change your mind about inclusion? And I think that's where we strive to raise the standards of the community artwork that we do. On a larger scale, big picture sort of way, we are 20 years behind countries like Finland when we talk about inclusion in our classrooms. we should not leave it up to the government to decide how we want our education system to look like. Arts groups can do a lot to shape the kind of social climate that will ready parents and teachers for inclusion eventually when it becomes okay on a policy level. But things like culture, it takes time, it takes generations. And I'm really, I think, encouraged by the fact that we're right at the beginning of our journey towards being a real inclusive society, not so much having people in wheelchairs physically present, but the fact that we're able to open our minds to different points of view, different ways of beauty, different ways of creativity. So that has been really empowering for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just very quick examples. I mean, just within my keynote there, we did a big demonstration of audio description. And one of our Access Arts members is a lady called Melissa, and she also took part in the audio description training. Melissa's blind, and she is part of the process in order to quality control audio description next year in Singapore. She's going to be our feedback person. And just last week, we were sat very remotely with a screen with a theatre show on there, and Melissa was sat listening to us audio describe for the very first time, and she's never been able to access a theatre show since she lost her sight. And she sat there and said how wonderful it was to be able to see a show through somebody else's eyes. And every time we described it, different people described the same show. She went, wow, I get to see the show again through someone else's eyes. And it was just an amazing moment. And we're just sat around with a PowerPoint at this point. We're not even in a live theatre situation yet. But I think that when you see those kind of access happen, it opens up these doors. And the last thing I would say is relating to the relaxed performance. I had an amazing journey with a family in the UK once where Mum came to me afterwards and said, so just want to say thank you to the company for putting this on. I said, no worries. The team that's put this on. And she said, it's the first time ever that I brought my 2 sons with autism, with their grandfather living with dementia, and we've all come out today to watch a theatre show, and it's been amazing. And I think if we start to think about those individual stories and the impact of the family when we open up access, then yeah, the results can be absolutely amazing. And for me, that's enough to keep driving the agenda.
Wow. I think you learned so much from them, from all their personal narratives, from individual to collective. I like to open to the floor at this time to round up. If there's any last question that you'd like to put to the panel before we close this session. Anyone? Thank you. It's called teacher wait time. Yeah.
We'll allow for awkward silences.
Yeah, just wait for the silence and be comfortable with it. That leaves me with this to share with you. You know, each one of us have ways of thinking and seeing how we can have accessibility to the arts. Who are the ones that we decide to are underserved? Who are the ones that we take up to curate? And the idea of kurate, the actual semiotics, the meaning behind karate, that you feel meaningful, that's special for you to show and to care for. And if each one of us in different communities can walk in that way, perhaps then from the impact and the influence that we can give, the authentic, meaningful, transformative ways that we can give in these intersections, perhaps then all these different communities can come together and make another different gracious society that we can see in our work. So it leaves me to thank all my distinguished speakers and thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you.
And of course, a big thank you as well to Mrs. Rebecca Chew, our moderator. Let's give her a big hand as well. Thank you very much, Mrs. Chew. Can we have a group photograph, please, with our panelists? Sure. And of course, not to forget as well, a big thank you to our performer, Grace, as well, putting us in the shoes of somebody who is visually impaired or blind. So of course, fits right in the theme of accessibility. So something for us all to think about. But otherwise, thank you very much once again to Ms. Jean Lu, Dr. Lucy Bolger, Ms. Izan Satrina, Ms. Rachelle Tan, Mr. Paul Adams, and Mrs. Rebecca Chew. Thank you very much for our second panel, topic, making arts and culture accessible for everyone. Once again, a big round of applause. Thank you very much to our panel. Well, just a gentle reminder, for the next session, you will need the translation kit. So for those of you who have not picked it up, please pick it up from the registration table outside. Once you are back, I will teach you how we can activate the translation kit. But otherwise, we do have a nice tea reception for all of you. Just do a quick time check. Please be back here by about 4:15. We will begin the panel 3 at 4:15. Once again, tea break is on your left-hand side. Translation kits, you can pick it up on your right-hand side. Thank you very much. We will see you very shortly at 4:15. Thank you. Well, panel 3, our final panel discussion for today, physical and psychological barriers to accessibility. So we have with us a very distinguished panel here today. Firstly, Mr. Chet McGitchie, Head of Visitor Teams and Access Lead, Manchester Museums and the Whitworth University of Manchester. Mr. Jeremiah Choi, Creative Director, Producer, Curator, Orange Dot Productions. The performance earlier this morning also by Mr. Jeremiah Choi. Mr. Kelvin Ang, Director, Conservation Management, Urban Redevelopment Authority. And Ms. Kim Yoon Yang, Educational Curator, Jeonju National Museum, Korea. The panel will be moderated by Dr. Meredith Martin, Associate Director of Cultural and Public Engagement, Chancellery University of Melbourne, Australia. Also at the same time, I'd like to remind all our guests that we will be using Pigeonhole, or later on if you wish to ask questions, please kindly ask via the microphones, but you can start inserting your questions onto Pigeonhole. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to hand the time over to our moderator, Dr. Martin, please.
Thank you so much. And before we start, I'd like to say what a very great honour it is for me to be here, both moderating this panel, but also to sign our MOU between the University of Melbourne and the National Heritage Board. And I'd like to personally thank my great friend Thangama for all her hard work in bringing that to fruition, and indeed to bringing this wonderful forum to fruition also. I want to start by acknowledging just what a stellar panel we have this afternoon, which is just as well because you're probably all getting a little bit tired. So buck up, stay with us. And such an important topic, physical and psychological barriers to accessibility. For if culture institutions are truly to be social inclusion change agents, they need to be leaders, not followers, in terms of accessibility. One of the key concerns of this panel is how design plays an integral part in making a space, building or program inclusive and welcoming, and how the use of non-verbal and verbal cues can have the potential to include and indeed to exclude. And I just wanted to briefly frame the discussion today through brief reference to the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, which was the recipient of a Jody Award in 2015 as a world leader for its commitment to accessibility, an early adopter, if you like. I use this example because as a Museum of Human Rights, the impetus to design a cultural experience that would be inclusive was absolutely core business. The starting principle for the CMHR was that the experience and expertise of people from diverse communities can and should be a force for innovation within the design process itself. They initiated an inclusive design or co-creative methodology of painstaking consultation and user testing in partnership with the groups that they'd aspired to serve. I thought this integration of user voice, and both Lucy and Paul talked about voice earlier, and indeed about the Declaration of Human Rights, but I thought it spoke nicely both to the focus on language in this panel and to the critical place of inclusion at the heart of design for accessibility. The CMHR's collaborative process of prototyping with real people resulted in a gallery experience that champions accessibility and usability as parallel experiences. In this way, from a museum professional perspective, and I paraphrase Corey Timpson, the VP Exhibitions Research and Design at CMHR here, accessibility has become a business practice that is ingrained in the day-to-day running of the museum. And I think, again, as David indicated when he was talking about the museum context, I think this relates to cultural institutions more broadly. So hopefully we can pick up some of those threads in our discussion. But with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Chad McGitchie, Head of Visitor Teams and Access at Manchester Museum and the Whitworth at the University of Manchester. Chad will be speaking about Manchester Museum's major new redevelopment, which will include the world's first centre for age-friendly culture. Chad's team are working closely with local disability organisations, mental health design consultants and visitors using their expertise and experiences to better understand how they might best break down barriers and create spaces accessible to all. Chad,
thank you very much.
Please.
Thank you.
Please welcome Chad.
Thank you very much. Yep, we're good? Thank you. I'd like to point out, just before I start, that my title here is Head of Visitor Teams and Access Lead. And I got this title about 5 years ago with the Access Lead. And at the end of this year, I'm going to drop that title because access should be embedded in everything that we do and everybody who works in an organization. So there shouldn't just be me or somebody else always in the room and asking about access and pushing the agenda of access and accessibility. So we're moving towards a place where I don't need to do that anymore. Now, that's not to say that I won't be doing it, but I just won't have that title, and I'll be relying on everybody in the organization to pick up the slack with that. So again, thank you very much for having me. It's an incredible honor to be here in Singapore. And just for you to know, I have a Canadian accent. I'm originally from Toronto, but I'll be speaking about everything in the UK. I've been there for about 15 years there and with the organization for 10. So I'd like to start a little bit and talk about our experiences and our passion for building design. And also about how we shape and grow our programs and our projects and how we use thoughtful signage and language to create a space where everybody can feel welcome. So I'd like to start with You've Arrived and tell you a little bit of a story about how the Manchester Museum and the Whitworth aim to be the most inclusive, imaginative, and caring spaces with that added personal touch. Right, so the Whitworth Art Gallery is part of the University of Manchester, as I said, and we were founded in 1889 as the first gallery in a park. And our collections are most well known for paper, wallpaper, and textiles. Our founding vision by our first director, Margaret Pilkington, was to be a source of perpetual gratification for the people of Manchester. And we still are. But what we did is we took this vision in a redevelopment project in 2015, and we took it from just being words and made it into bricks and mortar. So how did we do that? We were bold. Is this going to go? No? Yes? No? Yeah? Do you want me to stop? Someone else wants to do the next slide? There we go. We were bold and we asked people to fall back in love with us, and we built with heart. Right from the beginning, access and accessibility was the driving force in how we designed our building. We combined beautiful aesthetics with functional designs, which is not easy to do. And we consulted with our visitors and our local disability organizations, which we built great relationships with that are lasting. We doubled our sizes of galleries, we built a beautiful cafe in the trees, and we used our surrounding spaces in our parks and gardens and built tranquility in that. This was the redevelopment we were waiting for. However, it did come with some challenges. Working with a listed building has a lot of limitations, and there were some compromises that we needed to make. So for instance, there were times where we had to say the lift needs to go in this area here because this is the new part of the building, which then sometimes the distances where people had to walk were longer. The disabled bays were put a little bit further down the road, which we didn't like. And again, we had to have conversations with the council on how we can navigate that. And then what we did is we opened with a beautiful space, but people were like, why is that like that? And why is this there? And how come I can't see this? And what happened is we actually overlooked some of the areas, like signage, for instance. It wasn't as easy to find the toilets as we thought it was, because they were beautiful signage that was done very, very nicely. But it wasn't as open and accessible to people. But what we did, and what we found very useful, was to have a visitor team on hand. And by visitor team, it's anyone working in the public spaces and our volunteers, to be on hand to have those conversations. And they're wonderfully charming. And they would talk to people and understand and have conversations about people's needs. And they would tell their stories back to us and say, listen, we might have missed the mark on this. How do we change it? So we tried, and we continue to try, and we always need to keep looking to refine. So supporting the building, like I said, is the visitor team, and they really are the eyes, ears, and beating heart of the organization. And we invest in a significant amount of time and resources into every individual who works on the visitor team, because we want access to be beyond bricks and mortars and ramps and signage. It needs to be there with thoughtfulness and heart. So the visitor team, they attend lots and lots of training, which I put up on here for you. And they get really excited about those roles, because we recruit people who have the passion to be the mediators for the public, to have those conversations and to build understanding with who our visitors are. And we built meaningful relationships with arts and health and well-being organizations and our NHS, our Natural Health Services. And we started building relationships there so we could be a little bit more creative in how we actually design our programs and our exhibitions. So such exhibitions is Beyond Dementia. And it was co-curated by the fabulous Forgetful Friends, which I think is a fantastic name for a place, for people. They're a group living with dementia, and they're diagnosed with dementia and living in Manchester, And Beyond Dementia seeks to tackle some of the misunderstandings and stigma around the surrounding condition. It explores how both the act of viewing and making art can be powerful in a way of connecting with self, forging meaningful connections with others, and improving the general health and well-being of those living with the conditions and their carers. We also looked at things about making and learning new skills together. And I've added these ones here, which is the Caribbean Wellbeing Sessions. And this one's brand new, it's just started, and it came from an idea from one of the visitor team assistants from that descent, who said, I don't really see anything that I can identify with, and I know there's stuff in the collections, but where is it, and why can't I get my hands on it? So she found funding through the university and put together a project facilitated by the community around us, where they get to make and do things together, and it's all about that kind of health and care and well-being, and that identity again. And then Handmade is a sociable arts and crafts program, which is built just for the same reasons, about getting people together, learning new skills, working with artists. But the focus on that is not actually the well-being. It's actually about the making and the learning, but the well-being kind of comes naturally to it. But that's the real focus. So it's not like we have to say, this is for you, you can come here. It's for everybody to come. And what you get out of it is what you get out of it. So I'll quickly move on to the Manchester Museum. So we're currently going through a major redevelopment project, £13 million, to be the most inclusive, caring, and imaginative museum. The development will create new galleries devoted to South Asia and Chinese culture, the world's first center for age-friendly culture, and improve visitor facilities to be more inclusive and accessible in design. So being able to work in both organizations, we're now taking a lot of things that we learned from the Whitworth and applying them to the museum. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to build with care. Our architects and designers are also people who specialize in dementia-friendly spaces. So we have people who come in and do audits and walk around the building that we have and look through our plans to make sure that we're thinking about floor patterns and lighting, sensory areas, also about having changing places for adult changing facilities so that people can come in and freely move, because we don't have them as close as we would like them. And in the UK, if you're doing a major redevelopment, you better be really seriously looking at this. And a lot of people through social media have been challenging us on making sure there's enough money for areas like changing spaces. And then also, what we're looking at this is to make sure that we're going to be growing quite big, and we have these huge visitor figures that we're going to be thinking about. But the visitor team are now going, well, how do we keep the personal touch there? If we're going to grow and double in size and we have so many more people, how are we actually going to keep that meaningful and personal engagement? So moving on to language. This is going to run alongside the building works, and it's a really unique partnership that we're working with Multilingual Manchester, which is part of the university. And they've designed and come in and actually translated our Hello Future campaign here into 50 different languages in and around Manchester and Greater Manchester. So some of them like Chinese, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, and so many more. They're also going to be having workshops to facilitate people coming in. We're going to have thoughtful signage and tours to try and be, which our aim is to be the first major cultural institution to embrace language diversity. So this is one of my favorite parts here. This is the language tours that we're already doing right now. And the visitor team run highlight tours normally. We do lots and lots of work to make sure that they are insightful, they're for all ages, interest, abilities, lots of themes and everything like that. And we've worked with a lot of our organizations to come in and make sure that we can do this properly and that we are being thoughtful in our approach. So we have British Sign Language Assistant, we've done Makaton, we do audio described tours. And then at the Manchester Museum, we have Mandarin, Italian, and Spanish. And at the Whitworth, we have Korean and Japanese. Now, can anyone guess why we've chosen those languages? Those are the only languages other than English that the team speak. So we thought we would just start with that. There was a lot of pushback when we were looking at languages before, and a lot of people were like, well, why not this language? Are you looking at your visitors' languages from your local communities? Are you talking about the people who are coming from abroad? Are you talking about the most significant languages used in Manchester? And there was just so many questions, and then we just kind of got all confused, and it took years to kind of untangle that. So we just thought, let's just use what we have, and that's what we did. And these are the languages that we recruit for. And this is why every time I do a recruitment drive, I want more and more and more languages to be spoken. Really quickly, as I'm getting, just see I got a little bit of time left, this is some of the thoughtful signage that we worked with some people from our Alzheimer's Society and people living with sight loss. And it was about contrast and color and how that as long as we keep it consistent, people can understand and know where they're going to be. So some of our materials that are on the walls should match the materials that they have in their hands. We've also looked at where guide dogs can get water and do their business, how we can have handrails on the right side so that, because guide dogs are trained on the left, which I didn't know until only a few weeks ago, and that someone's there to meet them with a friendly smile and to say who they are and to welcome and to give clear direction of where they are. So, hi, my name is, and it gives that personal touch. And the thing is, though, is that the team do that for everybody. It's not just, oh, you look like you might be visually impaired, or oh, you look like you need help. We're trying to keep that in, it's for everybody. If you build for access, you're building for everybody. And really quickly here, this is a not so subtle barriers and things that we do. So we designed, this is our brochure here, and everyone can see on the screen there, it says large print, and it's in yellow, and it's really big, and it's very beautiful inside, and everyone really, really likes it. What I asked is, this is our main brochure, and we had these side by side. And we were asking people what they preferred, and everyone was really preferring this one because it was big and nice and this, but a lot of people weren't taking it because they're not visually impaired, and they didn't want to take it away from somebody who would need it. So this large print was actually stopping somebody from using the right way that they would have wanted to actually look at our material. And then other people said, I'd like this, but it's too big, I want a small one. So what's come out of this is actually we're taking this design, removing this, and making this one yellow. You know, it's not rocket science sometimes, you know, and people then can just freely choose which way they want to, which material they want to use. So really quickly, I'm going to wrap up with what we've learned. Start with the end in mind. If you start a design or you're starting any projects or any programs and then halfway down you're thinking, let's make them accessible, then you're already wasted a lot of time. You've got to start with the end in mind there and make sure that that's at the beginning of everything. Take time to really listen to people. That's the hardest part. Not thinking what people want, not thinking what you think audiences need or who's coming, but actually listen to the visitor team and to the people who are actually in those spaces. And the visitor team are where you get your most rich and diverse information. And if something isn't working, call it a day, figure it out. Think, okay, that's not working. How do we tackle it in a different way? Ask different people. Because if you have different people around the table and you're asking different questions and you're in different spaces and all this diversity is actually built with having more than the same people in the same room making the same decisions on the same day, monthly. And accessibility is such a personal subject. So really, really take the time to listen and understand that personal stories will come out of it, and you'll get quotes that you probably never even thought of, and you'll be using them when you talk to people around here, and you'll actually get to know the people who come through those doors. So I'm going to end, as I started with you've arrived, I'm going to end with see you again soon, because that's what we hope. People are going to be coming back to this. And really, what I wanted to leave with is this photo of my son. I've been talking a lot about my son to anyone who's had a conversation with me here, because it's about the awe and wonder that culture inspires and how museums and galleries can make us all feel like we belong. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks so much, Chad. And I just wanted to pick up a few of those themes so we can hold on to them and perhaps address some questions to them. And to start with your end, start with the end in mind. Yeah. I mean, I think that's great, and I guess that's what I was trying to speak to in the framing piece. Building with care, making and learning, the critical importance of relationships, the sustainability of personal touch with scale, at scale. I love the starting where you are in terms of the language diversity. It's great. And also the importance of the visitor team, both in terms of the communication of user voice and in terms of the diversity of the makeup of that team itself, yeah. And in terms of that enabling diversity. So, yeah, a great first presentation. And now it's my very great pleasure to move on to our next speaker, Mr. Jeremiah Choi, Creative Director, Producer and Curator at Orange Knot Productions, who has directed and produced an impressive range of theatre shows, concerts, arts festivals in Singapore and around the world. Jeremiah will be speaking about how he creates safe environments when he creates or collaborates in shows and events with people of all abilities and for people of all abilities.
Thank you, Meredith.
Jeremiah.
Thank you.
Please welcome Jeremiah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must confess that I feel a little out of breath sharing at this conference today, but I feel quite strongly of late on the subject matter of creating and providing a safe and supportive and protective environment, not only for performers of all abilities, but also for the audience and for the organizers as well. I must also qualify that I'm not an expert on this subject matter that I'm sharing, so please allow me to share from the bottom of my heart and from my experience. So, how do we begin? What is a safe working environment? I've searched the internet, and all of them kind of have some common features about a safe working environment, and it goes like, as employers, there is a responsibility to maintain a safe and healthy workplace. A safe and healthy workplace can help focus efforts at improving work environment and prevent injuries and illnesses at the workplace. And each and every organization has its own unique system and plan. So instead of the word workplace, which carries with it the image of working in an office or organization or a factory, I replaced it with the word environment, which contextualizes the situation that I always work in festivals, events, shows, productions, talks, conferences like this, and exhibitions. Collectively, I will refer them as production here for today's presentation. So what is a safe environment in the arts and culture industry context? I feel that it is an environment where people feel respected, valued, and are encouraged to reach their own potential. And it must be a safe space, not just physical, but also emotionally and mentally as well. recently, I watched A Singapore Carol. For those friends visiting us, this is one great show to watch. It's at Drama Centre, Victoria Theatre, sorry, and it's finishing at the 15th of December. Sorry, I have plugged it. It's not my production, but I really loved it. It has a huge children chorus performing in it. And it's based on, of course, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And it's transformed into a hilarious, heartwarming local pantomime dealing with some very tough adult issues of greed, ambition, self-centeredness. But throughout the whole production, I could feel that the children were very well loved, properly guided, and tenderly protected during the play. And I'm sure that they were also protected during rehearsals as well. And more importantly to me, I feel that their precious inherent innocence were preserved, even when they were dressed and are acting as adults. Very often, it's so easy to say, let's dress the children up as mini versions of the adults without much thought of consequences. Let's make them sexy, it's cute. But dressing them age appropriately is paramount. Making them sing age-appropriate lyrics is important. Giving them age-appropriate moves is vital. And as adults, we must and we have to know where the line is crossed. It was completely different from another show that I just watched. And I personally cringed at the very young children dressed up inappropriately, especially preteens and teenagers showing too much skin, singing inappropriate lyrics for their age, prancing around, touching themselves in a very adult way. I'm not sure, if the children were given sufficient guidance as to the meaning of what they were doing, and if they had any say, perhaps growing too fast, too soon, is not so cute for me, and we must protect them. The feeling of being respected, being valued is important, but we also must provide an environment where they feel encouraged to reach their full potential, and in a very safe environment. In another concert that I just recently directed, it's called Sunbest 2018, where we raise funds for Muscular Dystrophy Association of Singapore and SOTA. That's one of the items you saw this morning. In one of the performances, I paired SOTA alumni Caleb Lau, who was playing the piano, with another MDAS performer, Boon Keng. Caleb is a budding songwriter, pianist, singer in his own right. And when he auditioned for Sunburst, he auditioned to play a solo item. But I felt it would be good for him to do a duet with Boon Keng. Boon Keng was also in the performance this morning. He wanted to sing Wish My Life Away, but Caleb wanted to present his new song, Voices in My Head, Voices in My Head, which he wrote for the concert. So what I did was I set the two young adults up. I moderated their discussion. I watched safely from the side on the fringe so that they can negotiate with each other and collaborated a beautiful mashup of the two songs at the concert. After the concert, Caleb wrote to me. This is Caleb and Boon Keng. And Caleb said, I really appreciated the opportunity. At first, of course, it was a surprise because I was expecting to do a solo performance. But it was so much better as I got the opportunity to know everyone from MDAS. And if there's another opportunity next year, I would gladly collaborate with MDAS again. I'm so happy that this young man is able to put aside and overcome his individual ego to work with a fellow wheelchair-bound performer on an equal basis. And both has the opportunity to learn mutual respect, share each other's values, and push each other to their full potential for the performance. And having the knowledge that Boon Keng may not be able to sing next year because his muscles are wasting away, he may not have the breath to do so. So Caleb was magnanimous enough to allow that opportunity for Boon Keng to do so. So what about creating a supportive environment? How does the environment we are creating support that? It is not just about having suitable lighting conditions, appropriate sound levels, and making sure that the stage is accessible. A fellow practitioner once shared with me a very heartwarming real-life experience. Her group is called The Glowers. It is a company that conducts drama-related activities for senior performers, and they've just completed a performance in Japan. One of the performers is suspected of having an early onset of dementia. She often forgot her lines, her entry and exit. The other cast members were at first distraught by this. It upsetted the harmonious balance within the group. But they had an internal meeting. They decided that this is something that they want to do and they have to deal with. So they decided to support the person with suspected dementia and during the performance and the production itself. So with the cooperation of the director and other cast and crew members, they literally were there to hold her hands, bring her in, bring her out, guide her on stage, whispered the forgotten lines in her ears, and they managed to do 3 shows without major mishap. I'm so happy to know that there's so much love and care and concern, for each other on stage. This supporting environment goes beyond care and concern. It requires us to think from the angles of more than just the performer. It is necessary for us to think through as organizers and from the viewpoint of the audience as well. So in a recent, sorry, I've been not clicking. So these are the performances of them in Tokyo. And this is an enabling festival which I curated as a festival director. We saw many visitors, participants who came forward to learn more about dementia, either as caregivers or people suspecting with an early onset of dementia. The festival was held at the National Design Center. For me, the success of the festival was not the numbers of the people who attended, but for the people who came seeking, and they did so in a very safe environment. As organizers, we make sure that they were given sufficient privacy and assurance for them to discuss intimate issues, either on a one-to-one basis or in smaller groups. Experts and professional groups were on hand to help the participants. And it's heartening to see a group of no more than 10 participants huddling around the mahjong table, learning new and fun and inexpensive ways to engage and entertain people with dementia. This supportive environment facilitated to access support services and other resources, and it expanded capabilities, fostered resilience, and promotes self-reliance. And we need to understand and create empathy as well. My last point is creating a positive environment. When writing this article, I paused and reflected how often in our art-making process we neglect to place importance over our very own emotional and mental well-being and welfare. How often do we create subconsciously or unconsciously a toxic, negative, stressful, biased, even discriminatory environment that we work in? Another fellow theatre practitioner, Grace, and she's here today, Grace from Access Path Production, shared with me her difficulty in trying to start a professional company to change attitudes towards disabled people. The barriers are not just physical. She shared with me that clients, yes, even government organizations, cannot wrap their head around why she wanted to start a company to provide equal professional opportunities to people of all abilities. And she's constantly fighting a battle why these talents, though with disability, should be paid the same reasonable professional rates as any other able-bodied talents. Isn't that prejudice or even discrimination at work otherwise? Perhaps one of the reasons is the disbelief of sustainability. If an able-bodied performer finds it difficult to sustain a living in the arts, how much more difficult would that be for a person with disability? She said, and I quote, "The arts is already an insecure way of making a living. It is an antithesis of the iron rice bowl. And when you throw in people who do not fit into the normative mode of physical and social productivity, you get gatekeepers who will find my concept fantastical." I salute her bravery and her determination to continue this awareness that disabled artists do not just need exposure, they also need fair wages. And that disabled does not equate amateur. They too can be professionals in their own right. Sure, there may be other requirements, other work that additional work that we have to do when we decide to collaborate with them. I find it much easier if I'm always direct, explicit, comprehensive in working with them. Being upfront and honest is always the best policy for me. And it must be an environment that will nurture and empower all parties. So in closing, the concept of providing a safe, supportive, and positive environment for art makers of all abilities is still very new in our arts and culture industry. I'm not sure even if I have even formulated or touched on these points today, but I'm sure and I feel there's much left to be explored, and I hope that today's discussion can spark off further discussion, research, and eventually best practices for the sector. So shall we begin? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Jeremiah, what a refreshing and wonderful approach to take up sort of politics of labour to this question. I really wanted to point to your focus on empathy, which is beautiful, respect, resilience, and this notion that of professional rights as well as the opportunity for expression. Really, really compelling, and I think very timely for the creative industries, which are not renowned for really the rates of well-being in their entirety. So yeah, wonderful, thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mr. Kelvin Ang, Director Conservation for the Urban Redevelopment Authority, Singapore's National Planning, Land Use and Building Conservation Authority. Kelvin will talk us through a number of recent projects to illustrate how the desire for greater access to conservation and heritage sites may be affected by barriers of various kinds. Thank you, Kelvin. Please welcome Kelvin.
Selamat datang. Good afternoon, everybody, for being here with us, and thank you for sharing so much this morning. I've learned so much, and I'm actually coming in a way from outside a cultural institution. What I have been able to observe is really that there are many unspoken barriers that affect a desire for inclusion and accessibility. So I'll just go through a bit of what we have done, or what my organization has done, and what I have observed as problems from a professional point of view, as well as a personal point of view. So here goes. Which is a bit opportunities. For those of you who are new to Singapore, this was Singapore River 30 years, 40 years ago. We've really changed so much. And I think one very big issue for Singapore today is the understanding of our city and our country as a historic settlement. We are turning 720 years old next year, 200 years in a modern period, but our image is such that we don't think of Singapore as a historic settlement. And if our objective, starting from the beginning, the end in mind, is to say that Singapore has history, then what's the best way of getting the message through to our fellow citizens? So my organization deals with conservation, meaning listed buildings in the UK context, and we've got quite a lot of buildings that are protected. And it's really something that's been a leader in Southeast Asia. But really, what have we achieved in addition to legal protection? Have we been inclusive? Have we been making sure that our heritage assets are something that the ordinary person in the street, be it special needs or not, are able to feel that it's something important to them? Singapore's conservation program does not seek to turn our city into a museum. We cannot afford that. But we do seek to make sure that our city's heritage assets are integrated into everyday life. So it's almost like living in an old place, not quite like our friends in France or Europe where it's really living, but we hope to integrate heritage with everyday life. And why conserve? I think like many cultural institutions, there's a certain idea of a mission statement. We want to transmit culture from the past into the future. And we've also started from a position in maybe 40 years ago where it's been expert-led. We are conserving this because the expert says it's beautiful enough, it's old enough, it's therefore valuable enough. There's this high-level history, high-level culture that we seek to protect. But is this what the people really want? And our experience in the past 15 years has been that our people are talking about heritage and culture in terms of that personal impact. They want to have a sense of home in this city. So to the public, conservation is to achieve the objective of feeling at home. To the expert, we have to move towards that because we answer to the public. But we also lead. So this is an interesting situation. To what extent do you lead and to what extent do you serve? Okay. In terms of our department's work, I think we are very much tied to the national agenda in Singapore of nation formation. We are not a natural country, and we have been trying to create the sense of common identity and memory. And our first Minister for Culture, Mr. S. Rajaratnam, stated it in this little quote, and that has been our direction, our compass, right? We need to bring people together. So how do we bring people together? How do we build this awareness of a common destiny or a common future when we've got such diverse pasts? Okay, you've got this. How do we make this place home? I choose this picture because this is something that's quite a popular spot for wedding pictures. There's a Scottish bridge and an English building at the back, and people get wedding pictures taken there. To some extent, heritage in Singapore is now accepted as a nice icing on the cake. It's a pretty spot. You get a wedding picture there, graduation picture there. You feel connected to Singapore's history at your own important milestones. But is this enough? Maybe not. So what have we observed? Home in Singapore has shifted. It has shifted from the Chinatown, the Little India, the Arab streets of the old city, to the suburbs. I guess like many big cities in Europe and Asia, the people have moved out to the suburbs, whereas the historic center has now put under new use. So in Singapore, home is now the new towns of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? And we do try to talk to people, like our colleagues, what do the ground feel about heritage? And people talk about heritage in terms of memories. What are the places they feel they've got memories? And the young people don't care, and the parents of young children also don't seem to register heritage sites as being important to them. But the old folks do, perhaps because they grew up in the old city, and the young working adults do, because perhaps they go on dates or they get drunk at Bolger on a Friday night. These are various ways of actually memory formation in the city. So we have to think about young people and parents of young children. Why don't they feel heritage sites are relevant for them? If they don't have a sensation of belonging now with these sites, will they feel that heritage is accessible to them in the future? People are satisfied. That is Singaporean. We do all the surveys where people are satisfied. But we also, as Kenny says, we don't rest on our laurels. But what do people want? We are not so good at understanding what people really, really want behind what they say. So those we have to investigate more. And people want a sense of community identity. They want to have physical access, which sometimes is complicated by fragility of sites. And there's this issue about economic access. They want things that they feel they can afford. I think this is the theme we've heard throughout the day. What can they afford? How do we deliver it? So these 3 points I will then illustrate a little bit in terms of the barriers I've seen encountered. Now, this is a postcard from, I think, just after World War I, really. And it's this important road called South Bridge Road. It's a wonderful area with a South Indian mosque and a South Indian Hindu temple. But this area, even though it's protected in the past 40 years, we have called it Chinatown. For those of you who are new to Singapore, what is an issue with the word Chinatown? It is just a name, but this name has meant that we have got young people in Singapore from other ethnicities who say, I don't go there because I'm not Chinese. But this heritage area is for everybody. And what do our South Indian communities feel about their important sites being subsumed under the label Chinatown? We have to investigate further. Our heritage areas have been transformed and restored wonderfully, but the communities have moved out to new towns. So the streets have gone from local community streets to streets for tourism. It is a natural process in many countries because of economic imperative. But again, what is the price that we may be paying? Young people say, I don't go there because there's nothing for me to do. It's a tourist site. Should we be worried about it? They go there once in their life at least because of school. But beyond that, I want them to go because they love the place, right? That's a problem. All our buildings are largely protected that are largely privately owned. So we may have restored a building 30 years ago. The Queen visited with the Duke of Edinburgh is wonderful as a marketing thing. But does it mean that the person on the street can go in now if it's a shop? They can't. So what we try to do is to find other sites to restore. This is 157 New Road before restoration. It's a very fragile site. And we have to balance preservation with interpretation and access. But because this is a very fragile site, even though it's restored, as a house, as a conservationist, I would privilege the house first. But subsequently, in terms of programming, I must limit in terms of numbers, programming. I can't have children running in there. But do I say it's better than nothing because now our young people can see this house in Singapore and not have to go to Malacca or Penang to see a house? You know, how do we find solutions around these situations? Community buildings. This is a wonderful community building in Chinatown. This is another thing that we encounter. As a conservationist, we privilege the material object. We privilege the material of the building. And because these objects have cultural meaning, in a Chinese building, the door sill is very important. It's you see the little red box, that's the door sill. But we want to have barrier-free access for the elderly, etc., disabled. So we put in objects like ramps, etc., or stair lifts. We had to work with our building agency to say, we cannot insist on a door sill being removed because it's historical. But they had to say, but I cannot give you the funding for this barrier-free access if I don't have certainty that the barrier will not be removed. So a lot of discussion about access has to be talked through within the agencies. And we don't know these problems until we talk to the community. They say, look, we have a problem, what can we do? But perhaps there are other solutions. Maybe virtual access, making short films to talk about the community is important. And you notice something here, there's little subtitles. This is a Cantonese community. The interview was actually in Mandarin and Cantonese. We had to persuade the interviewers and documentaries to put in subtitles so that the non-Cantonese community can understand it. It's not worthwhile doing a project if we don't put in a little bit more to get more inclusiveness. Other ways could be doing murals. These we can't insist, but we can encourage, because if we don't explore these ways of intervention into the community or buildings, then this building remains mute. Jeremiah, this building is where Lim Boon King and his friends had to raise the $1 million ransom to save the Singaporean Chinese men from the World War II switching. But no one knew about this building because it was just a blank wall. So this is the entry point. Just zooming a bit, we have some surveys. We have some rankings of buildings that are conserved in Singapore. What's interesting is that whatever we've conserved, sometimes people don't feel the association. Perhaps these two buildings, one is ranked 65, one is ranked 34. The town hall is impressive, but the town hall is isolated. You and I don't go to the town hall, but millions of children have gone to the science center. Is this a hint for us about inclusiveness? We must make sites accessible at the very basic level of day-to-day or having children. So just to conclude, this is my neighborhood. I live in Tiong Bahru. It's a now hipster neighborhood with wonderful coffee, cakes, fashion, etc. But what does it mean for people? Do we feel that we belong in this neighborhood that we live in? Okay, maybe I do because I live there. But how about other people? This is a group of students who live literally 10 minutes walk from this wonderful estate. We want conservation to help young people like these feel that Singapore is their home. But they told us, we never come here because we feel we don't belong. It's just 10 minutes away by foot. Because they felt that being in their underprivileged position of, low income, etc., they wouldn't be welcome. We were so hurt as residents. But so how do we overcome this? We overcome this because we could work with NGOs like Readable to bring them in. This is not something that I think a government agency per se could do on its own, but we have to be open enough to talk to our partners to find solutions. So I've shared with you many, many problems because I think only by talking about them we can find solutions along the way. So thank you very much, and yeah, I hope to learn much more from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Thank you so much. Yeah, that tension is really poignant between the need to privilege materiality in terms of conservation and the need for interventions in the material to enable access. Otherwise, and I love this notion of the importance of home and feeling at home in terms of how to achieve a kind of commonality in diversity. And it occurred to me that in terms of we'll talk about, oh, you don't want to, I mean, with Rome, for example, it's a sort of museumified city. But it occurred to me that if we thought of museums more in the sense that David was sketching this morning, that wouldn't be such a bad thing. And they'd be more what you've gestured towards in terms of maintaining that balance between the experience of the everyday and the sustainability of materiality. So thank you so much. Now, I think we need to get our headsets on. And it's my very great pleasure to introduce next Ms. Kim Eun-young, who is Educational Curator at the Jeonju National Museum in Korea, who will reflect on the attempts by national museums in Korea to remove physical and psychological barriers which visitors may face in accessing museums. And I'm just going to put my on too.
안녕하세요. 저에게 그 헤드셋을 끼고 한국어에 액세스해 주셔서 감사합니다. 저는 국립전주박물관 학예연구사 김은영입니다. 문화기관이 다양한 커뮤니티에 접근하는데 그 역할과 창의적 방법에 대한 생각을 나눌 수 있는 이번 컨퍼런스에 초대해 주셔서 감사합니다. 박물관 접근성에 물리적, 심리적 장벽을 낮추는 데 한국의 사례가 도움이 될 수 있기를 희망합니다. 저의 발표는 국립중앙박물관의 박물관 접근성에 있어 물리적, 심리적 장벽을 없애기 위한 사례를 소개하고 제가 박물관 교육 담당자이기 때문에 교육적인 관점에서 박물관 역할의 사례를 좀 더 소개하도록 하겠습니다. 박물관은 관람객이 박물관에 들어서는 순간 시간과 공간이 교차되는 의미 있는 공간이 됩니다. 모두의 이야기가 담겨 있는 것이지요. 그러나 박물관 문을 들어서는 관람객이 없다면 모든 의미는 사라질 것입니다. 한국에서 박물관은 전시와 교육, 문화행사, AI, 디지털 매체 등을 통해 연령, 인종, 다양한 문화 등 사회를 구성하고 있는 다양한 요소, 즉 다양성을 포용하기 위해 노력하고 있습니다. 보시는 이곳이 국립중앙박물관입니다. 국립중앙박물관의 역사는 1909년부터 시작되었고 2005년 현재의 위치에 자리하게 됩니다. 41만 개의 컬렉션을 보유하고 있으며 350만 명의 방문객이 2005년 이후로 다녀가셨습니다. 박물관 조직은 보시는 것과 같이 기획운영단, 학예연구실, 교육문화교류단으로 구성되어 있고 정규직, 비정규직을 합쳐 약 500명이 일하고 있습니다. 국립중앙박물관에는 보시는 바와 같이 중앙박물관 산하의 각 지역을 대표하는 13개의 소속 박물관이 자리하고 있습니다. 국립중앙박물관의 액세스 액션 슬로건은 모두에게 친근한 박물관입니다. 선택의 기회는 누구에게 있는가? 다양한 커뮤니티 중 박물관을 경험하는 데 물리적 장벽을 느끼는 시각, 청각 등 장애인을 위해서 박물관 내 이동을 유도하는 점자 타일, 음성 안내기와 점자 패널 등을 제공하고 있습니다. 또한 상설 전시실 1층 6곳에서는 보시는 것과 같이 모형 전시품을 만져보며 듣고 느낄 수 있는 시각장애인을 위한 공간을 마련하고 있습니다. 신체가 불편한 자는 엘리베이터를 이용해 모든 전시실에 접근할 수 있습니다. 그리고 전시 해설팀에는 수화 전문가가 근무하고 있어 언제든지 1층 안내 데스크에서 관람객을 맞이합니다. 박물관은 시각장애인이 박물관 주차장에서 전시실까지 오는데 소요되는 시간이 비장애인과 크게 차이나지 않도록 끊임없이 노력해야 하며 전시와 문화활동 참여에 대한 선택권은 그들에게 주어져야 됩니다. 국립박물관은 시각장애인들에게 문화재에 대한 다양한 정보를 제공하고자 소장품 관련한 점자책을 제작하여 시각장애인 점자 도서관 등에 제공하고 있습니다. 슬라이드에서 보시는 것처럼 전국 국립박물관의 대표 소장품을 모은 점자책, 그리고 교육을 위한 점자책, 그리고 소속 박물관에 있는 지역을 대표하는 문화재에 대한 접근성을 높이기 위한 점자책을 만들어 제공하고 있습니다. 국립중앙박물관과 국립전주박물관에는 시각장애인을 위한 문화재 촉각 체험 공간을 2005년과 2006년에 마련하였습니다. 시대를 대표하는 문화재 복제품을 만져보며 연극, 놀이 등 다양한 예술적 체험을 할 수 있는 공간입니다. 박물관의 활동에 장애인과 비장애인의 구분은 없습니다. 하지만 이 공간의 의미는 시각장애인을 위한 공간이란 점 외에도 비장애인이 항상 방문하여 시각장애인의 문화활동과 그 필요성에 대해 인식하고 공감할 수 있었다는 것입니다. 시각장애인의 촉각 체험을 제가 10년간 진행해 오면서 조금의 고려할 사항은 다음과 같습니다. 전맹을 제외한 약시 등 시각장애인은 가까이 보려는 특성이 높으므로 주변 방해물에 주의해야 합니다. 시각장애인은 선천성 장애보다 사고, 질병으로 인한 후천적 장애 비율이 높으므로 기억을 떠올릴 수 있는 설명은 그들의 이해를 더욱 돕습니다. 50대, 60세 이상 시각장애인의 경우 소장품을 기반으로 그들의 이야기를 듣고 공감해주는 시간이 더욱 필요합니다. 우리는 장애인과 같은 사회 소수에 대한 배려를 인식하곤 합니다. 하지만 그 관심과 실천이 지속적이기보다는 일시적이기 쉽습니다. 바로 이 점에 대해서 얘기하고 싶었습니다. 박물관과 문화재에 대한 장애인 프로그램입니다. 연극이나 음악이나 여러 가지 문화예술적 장르의 전문가들과 협업하여 진행하고 있는 프로그램 사진이기도 합니다. 선택권이 누구에게 있느냐는 굉장히 중요한 문제인 것 같습니다. 제가 2007년 시각장애인 프로그램을 준비하면서 자료조사를 했을 때 한국의 시각장애인의 경우 50% 이상이 영화 감상 말고는 문화활동을 선택할 수 있는 다양성이 거의 존재하지 않고 있었다는 점입니다. 그것은 저희 같은 문화기관에서 어떤 프로그램을 일시적으로 하는 거에 참여하는 것과 그들이 어떤 필요에 따라 평상시에 접근할 수 있는 문제는 굉장히 다른 문제라고 생각이 듭니다. 보시는 사진에서 그 남자아이가 보이실 것입니다. 같은 아이입니다. 2년 후에 박물관에 방문하여서 프로그램을 진행했던 사진입니다. 이렇듯 그들에게 문화활동을 할 수 있는 기회가 주어져야 된다고 생각합니다. 박물관과 문화재에 대한 정보를 충분히 제공하는 것 또한 물리적 장벽을 가진 자들에게 박물관 접근성을 높이는 데 중요한 요소입니다. 국립중앙박물관 홈페이지에는 550여 점의 문화재에 대한 설명이 수화 동영상으로 제공되고 있으며 수화 전시 해설도 제공되고 있습니다. 물리적 거리를 좁히기 위한 아웃리치 프로그램을 진행하고 있습니다. 지역 학교와 축제 등에 지속적으로 찾아가고 있으며 소장품을 활용한 여러 체험 활동들로 박물관에 대한 관심과 재방문을 유도하고 있습니다. 재소자 등 박물관에 오기 어려운 물리적 환경 대상을 모색해서도 아웃리치 프로그램을 진행하고 있습니다. 학습기 소아암, 백결병 등으로 오랜 투병 생활을 하고 있는 환아를 찾아가는 아웃리치 프로그램을 운영하고 있습니다. 오랜 입원과 주기적 통원 치료 등으로 청소년기 학습에 대한 의욕과 기대가 낮은 청소년들에게 VR 등을 활용하여 문화체험 활동을 진행하고 있습니다. 그들은 적절한 도전 과제를 해결하며 성취감을 느낄 수 있었습니다. 전시실과 학교 교실이 실시간 연결돼서 진행하는 수업을 진행하기도 했습니다. 지역의 거리와 관계없이 박물관에 대해서 알아볼 수 있었던 시간이었습니다. 근대 이후 한국 박물관에서 가장 중요한 화두 중 하나인 관람객은 박물관의 역할과 기능 중 교육적 가치와 역할의 확대로 자연스럽게 이어졌습니다. 국립박물관의 경우 중앙박물관 이하 13개 소속 박물관에서는 어린이, 가족, 외국인 거주자, 노인, 장애인 등 대상별 교육 프로그램을 매우 활발히 하고 있습니다. 교육 문화 프로그램은 대상별 요구와 필요에 부응한 다양한 커뮤니티의 접근성을 높이기 위한 박물관의 적극적인 활동입니다. 심리적 장벽을 없애고 박물관의 접근성을 높이기 위한 프로그램을 소개하도록 하겠습니다. 박물관에 방문할 수 없는 벽은 신체적, 정신적 장애뿐만 아니라 다양한 심리적 요인에 기인합니다. 중앙박물관 및 13개 소속 박물관에서 공통적으로 관심을 갖고 심리적 장벽을 허물기 위한 교육 프로그램은 첫 번째가 결혼 이주로 인한 한국에 거주한 여성, 외국인 노동자 등 외국인 거주자에 대한 언어와 문화의 장벽을 허물기 위한 프로그램. 두 번째로는 고령화 사회에 진입한 한국에서 노인 계층의 문화 향유 활동과 치매 예방, 그리고 치매 환자 가족들을 위한 프로그램입니다. 70년대 음악을 통해 추억하고 대화를 나누는 치매 환자 프로그램과 같이 심리적 장벽을 낮추기 위한 프로그램은 그들의 이야기를 더욱더 나눌 수 있도록 해야 합니다. 박물관은 그들에게 쉼터와 같은 역할을 해야 되는 것이지요. 편한 나무 그늘 아래서 쉰 것처럼 느낄 때 그들은 박물관을 다시 또 찾게 됩니다. 그 외에 박물관에 속한 지역 사회의 사회문화적 환경에 따른 심리적 장벽을 낮추기 위한 대상을 모색하고 프로그램을 운영하고 있습니다. 예를 들어 13개 소속 박물관 중 하나인 국립춘천박물관은 강원도라는 곳에 위치하고 있습니다. 강원도는 남북 분단선에 근접한 곳으로 이곳에는 군부대가 많이 위치해 있습니다. 국립춘천박물관은 병역의 의무로 긴장된 상황 속에 생활하는 군인들에게 힐링의 시간을 제공하고 있습니다. 박물관은 인종, 종교, 나이, 장애 등의 구분 없이 다양한 사회 문제를 담아내며 이에 대한 공감과 참여를 불러일으킬 수 있는 공간입니다. 그러기 위해 박물관은 사회 변화를 담아내고 누구에게나 열린 공간이 되기 위한 노력을 지속적으로 기울여야 할 것입니다. 지속적인 공감을 불러일으키고 긍정적인 변화가 시작되는 곳, 누구나 박물관에는 창조적인 문화 생산의 주체가 될 수 있도록 해야 할 것입니다. 이상입니다. 발표를 들어주셔서 감사합니다.
Thank you so much. I think that we can all agree that it's a great account of a museum devoted to social inclusion. We've got a few questions on Pigeonhole, but I chatted to the panel earlier, and I'd like to encourage them to ask questions of each other, so that we have a conversation this way and this way. So I might kick that off. I've got a a burning question for Chad, actually. So I might start with a question, and then perhaps once I've done mine, Chad, you could pose a question to the panel, and then we'll go to the floor, so we can kind of move in and out. I've only got a few pigeonholers, so presumably there's someone who wants to grab a mic out there. So if there is, please put your paw up and grab one. Chad, I'd like you to elaborate a little more on the consultative approach you took with designers and the communities that you wish to enable access for, just to unpack that a little for us.
Yeah.
And just because I guess you were really pointing to the importance of those relationships, but didn't have a whole lot of time to elaborate on them. So that'd be, I assume everyone's interested. I'm interested in that process of consultation too.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. It comes in weird and wonderful ways, and I don't think there's one real approach to kind of going out and seeking consultants necessarily, but we did, the way I started out personally was we took on some placements of some young people with different abilities, and they needed to have some additional support, and they were supported by this young company called Hear First, which was for people who were deaf and hard of hearing, and getting people back into work. And so as they were coming in, I was talking with the manager there, and then I was saying, well, how do we prepare? How do we get ready? And then really over the years, it just snowballed into working with the director and saying, well, we should be training our staff in different ways, and we should make our spaces different. And then I kind of built a good relationship with her and a friendship. And then she introduced me to so many more people. And it was like, well, have you thought about, talking to so-and-so at Henshaw's for visually impaired, or so-and-so at this? And it kind of just, over the career, kind of took on a life of its own. And the hard thing about that, though, was that it became a little bit, well, why am I the only one thinking about this? Or I am thinking about it, but why am I not sharing? So in the same way that I was open to meeting all of those people and connecting, I then turned and said, well, now we need to be looking more about our buildings and how we curate spaces and how we design. And it kind of was a very organic approach to it. But the only way that we could truly be accessible with these collaborations was that the people that they met when you walk through those doors are trained up and clued up. So we could build for dementia, we can have all of these great exhibitions, we can bring the fabulous Forgetful Friends in, but what's the legacy of that? So they've done that, they've created an affinity with us, and then all of a sudden that is over. So then my team need to be really built in confidence and understand that that's just not a one-off training session you're gonna get. So we try and go way beyond awareness and try and actually build partnerships that are lasting and quite meaningful, so that it can kind of change how they, and it sometimes changes how they work as well. So they would build their training courses for us, and then instead of just maybe a corporate environment, they really start to rethink and unpack how they work. Yeah.
Would you like to pose a question to one of the panelists?
Yeah, I'll talk about Kelvin, actually, about designing for access, just getting the basics right. And I think that sometimes getting the basics right could be something that people might find super obvious and really easy, but actually when you're planning and what you do. So how do you build that? Because it can be quite complex, and access, as I said, is very personal. So how do you kind of really bridge the gap to be as inclusive for as many people as you can be? But then what do you do if there's a bunch of people who you might actually not be able to access places?
I think this is really one of the big challenges in the cultural field. We all see conservation and heritage in very different ways.
Yeah.
But when they come together on one site, like a museum or a house, like the one we were restoring, it's important to have, I think, the kind of professional respect and honesty with each other, say, really what are we trying to get? And to not assume that you mean the same thing when you use the word conservation or heritage or culture. You know, for example, the issue with the show house that we have, we put in the lift so that anyone in a wheelchair can go upstairs and see the artifacts. But now you talk us through all the different things to think about. Oh wow, the lift is a simple thing, but what else might we need to do to welcome someone who's less able onto site? You know, how do I work with my partners in the museum to talk about this? So I think having a chance to to have conversations is really a very first start. But the other thing that I think sometimes it's difficult for the different professionals to come together would be maybe the lack of evidence of need. You know, we tend to think, oh, you know, I'm the typical person with my abilities, etc. So therefore, that is how I design the world. I think this is really one big issue with the architectural fraternity. We design for ourselves. So things like font sizes, floor patterns, service spaces, we rarely think about it because we haven't really had a chance sometimes to hear from our partners on the ground, work communities. Hey, I need to deal with this. You know, should we be inclusive? So I think having the conversation, platform is really most important.
And that the co-creation is embedded at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Rather than added on at the end.
But this means that as cultural workers or heritage workers, we must stop thinking of ourselves as God. You know, architects in particular, we think of ourselves as God. So I'm trained as architect, so it's something I do.
Well, we could even be changing like curators' minds as well. So we would be building spaces that are meant to be very dark, and you're supposed to immerse yourself in this experience. And some people who have, you know, who were visually impaired, they couldn't really understand because it was just too, they just couldn't figure out how to be in the space. And so what we compromise is, can we just have a little lit area where we can then do a bit of a tour here or do more audio described.
And then that's quite a simple recalibration.
It's simple, and it's again people's aesthetics and access, and why can't they just get along, and why are you creating this atmosphere that you're actually segregating somebody? So those compromises there set precedents. So now sometimes when we bring in exhibitions and they say you can only show it this way, we challenge that instead of just being like, okay, you're the boss, you know. But we actually challenge the way that we curate now.
That's great. I'm going to. Is there any questions from the floor before I go to Pigeonhole? No? No hands up. I have one here with 11 votes. Why does Singapore rely so much on the idea of nostalgia to supposedly build identity? Who would like to take that one on? Okay, Kelvin, take it away. But Jeremiah, everyone, please jump in.
Because you also deal with production and
absolutely.
New projects, right? I don't think that as a participant in the cultural network within the government side, we rely very much on nostalgia to build identity. Because all our objects and stories are real. They are real stories. They have great meaning. But at the moment, this nostalgia thing is everywhere. So I would say perhaps we are just using nostalgia as a vehicle to attract the man or woman in the street to enter the museum, to enter the heritage site, to access the materials, to be interested. Yeah. So I would say that it is a vehicle at the moment, for me at least, to get people interested in understanding what Singapore identity is made of or could be. But it's not to be all, you know.
Jeremiah?
Well, I mean, having worked on many projects, especially projects for the government, I don't think it is nostalgia that we are hooking on to. It's actually stories. I think every time, you know, when I get a brief, you know, when I go into a tender meeting, whatever it is, they're very interested in trying to get stories from people. And of course, a lot of people, when they encounter these stories, they always think about nostalgia. Actually, it's not. It's actually the stories of ourselves, of our fathers, of our next generation, that we're trying to gather these stories to therefore build identity. I think I would replace the word nostalgia to stories, which is more true than nostalgia itself.
And then I guess the idea is to have as many, that it is stories, plural.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this thing about stories is, I think, is a very complicated subject about who tells the story. I think sometimes, say, creating that safe or creating the ethical framework for story collecting or storytelling is something that I think we need to talk about more. So, say within my family, I asked my aunt about her experience in the war. She would tell me in quite a lot of detail what went on, etc., etc. But that's because we're a family. She is able to share all this with me. When she shares the same experience with her grandniece, she cuts many things out because she doesn't wish to burden that generation with too much of the past. And this is something we can do as a family. We have the right to do it. But when we are working in a national institution, these difficult stories, actually, how should we collect them and how do we use them responsibly, or what right do we have to use them in some cases? And if some of these stories cannot be told by us as an institution, then who else can tell the story? So some of you might have read the book 17A Keong Siak Road. It is a story of a girl who grew up in a house in the Chinatown area as a daughter of a brothel keeper. That is a beautiful, beautiful street of shop houses conserved, but that story could not be told by anybody else except her. Mm. So we then use nostalgia as a way to, oh, it's such a pretty street. But because perhaps I feel that I have no right to tell that story. You know. So I think we're thinking about.
Please, Inyan.
Yes.
저도 그 발표하신 그 향수 노스텔지아라는 그 모토를 듣고 굉장히 좋은 생각이다라는 생각을 했는데요. 저희 박물관에서도 박물관과 유물이나 이런 거에 전혀 관심이 없는 뭐 60대 시각장애인, 뭐 남성분 이런 분들에게 교육적인 접근을 할 때 스토리, 노스텔지아, 이 향수 이런 거를 중심으로 그들에게 유물과 연관지어서 더 관심과 흥미, 공감을 갖도록 하고 있거든요. 그래서 굉장히 싱가포르 그 주제에 대해서 굉장히 공감이 많이 됩니다.
Thank you, it's true. I might go to, do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, great. Yes, please. Can we have a mic?
Sorry, I have no question, but I just want to comment on that question that about nostalgia. I think over here in Singapore, we are actually using shared memories. It's about our roots that we are actually based on, so that to build that shared identity or to build our identity. And maybe I introduce myself. I'm Pek Hun from People's Association. I will be sharing tomorrow as well. What I'm going to share tomorrow, what that PA is doing is actually creating a lot of shared memories among the people. And by creating shared memories through programming, through heritage, through all kinds of platforms, that we are actually creating shared memories, and then there will be a roots that is being shared among our people. So the younger, the older, the middle generation all share the same memories, all share the same roots. So I thought that is what we are using to create that identity or to build that identity. So I thought I just want to comment on that.
Thank you. That's great for you to be part of the conversation. We might move on. I think it'd be good, let's look at this one. How did you decide on what kind of challenge, e.g. dementia, to tackle, and what made you decide to tackle that instead of another? I mean, how do you privilege what to focus on? I guess, who wants to take that?
I can start. There was, within the university, and a lot of research was coming in, and we're learning more and more about dementia, and we're learning about, and the Alzheimer's Society was really promoting and getting involved in going out there. And with the university, they were working to really get a better understanding and to help, because it's just an aggressive, crazy disease, and it is affecting so many people, and the more stories and things we were talking about in people, it was just really kind of gathering a lot of momentum. And so we were really kind of fortunate to kind of partner with them and to get a better grasp of dementia, and then that kind of spiraled into a lot more projects in prep. So I don't know if we really kind of wanted to just go there ourselves, but it kind of just seemed to be coming to us. And there was a lot of arts and health and well-being people in the organization that said, we're not really designing properly for this. We're not really taking, so maybe this is where we start, and then, we can kind of branch out from there. So I vowed that everybody on my team would become a dementia friend, which means you go on a course and you learn quite playfully and very memorably so you can understand about dementia. And then the next level of that is becoming a dementia champion. And once you become a champion, then you can lead the dementia friends. So that it wasn't about everyone coming and certain people just coming and doing the same training. It was actually just kind of expanding and expanding. So everybody on my team was a friend. All my managers, including myself, are champions. So that when people were leaving the roles, we didn't have these big gaps. And that kind of then moved into other mental health and well-being. And we did mental health first aid kits, is what they're called, and kind of getting people to realize that there's, everyone suffers, everyone has mental health and kind of goes in different ways. And and so if we're kind of just tackling mental health broadly, then it gives us a better understanding to help our visitors. So again, it wasn't just something specific we were going to, it was kind of opening up and being a bit more broad in our approach to that. So yeah, it's a good question, but I think like David said and others, it's like you kind of have to have a starting point and then you need to kind of branch out there. And this is why I love symposiums and conferences like this to share, so that if someone else is doing something in a different field and has expertise and have been building that, instead of us starting from scratch, we talk. And we share resources and we share people and you fly people around and you gather your meetings. And then I think that's how we can kind of learn collaboratively.
And Young, did you want to speak to that question? No?
They're waiting for me to finish.
No? Jeremiah?
Maybe I'd like to. I curated the Enabling Festival this year, and basically it was started by two very young gentlemen, Danny Tan, who is an artist, and Daniel Lim. Both parents are having dementia. So they went around looking for information for organizations that talk about or can help them look for things for their parents. They decided that there wasn't enough done for people with dementia or people whose parents are starting to have dementia. So they wanted to have a festival. And one of the things that pushed them forward is when they bring their parents out and the parents are having a meltdown, they felt embarrassed and they felt that the public didn't understand why there's a dementia person not able to cross a zebra crossing because they can't see the black. They saw the black as a whole. And they won't want to move forward, and therefore it was difficult trying to make them cross the road. And the audience or the people around them started to look at this fiasco that's happening, and they felt, oh dear, I'm embarrassed, therefore I'm not going to take my parents out anymore. And it's as simple as wearing a white shirt with white buttons. They can't see the white buttons on the white shirts. And therefore they will not wear that shirt because it's not that I am not able to button my own clothes, but it's because I can't see white on white. So having this little information will help us start to empathize, not just people with dementia, but the caregivers and the people around people with dementia. And therefore, it was a very important learning curve for me curating this. It went down to font sizes, colors, what kind of font that they can recognize. It's not just for the people to come, but for the people with dementia wanting to come as well. And this very important thing about the safe space, because we had a postmortem immediately after the festival, and they said, oh, it was very, very successful, let's do it in a bigger space. I went, no. I thought that the National Design Center was the perfect space for it, because it wasn't easily accessible to thousands and thousands of people walking along like in a shopping mall, so that I have a safe private space to be able to share stories about my parents, about myself, about potential people, because these are very private stories. So I think it's not just about giving a platform or doing a festival, but understanding everything around it. Yeah.
And that speaks to your point, Chad, too, about the notion of, sustaining and maintaining that sense of intimacy at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like really, if you start designing for access, it opens everything up for all people. I mean, like people look at my phone and they're just like, why aren't you wearing glasses? Because my font's so big. And it's just like, well, I prefer it and I have the option to do that. So we want to be able to have people who can kind of come in and almost curate their own experiences. And we've kind of just put things out there and you can kind of choose at will. So one of the points I didn't raise before was all of the accessible and additional support material was always, we have large print, ask a member of the team. Here's a raised image you can feel, ask a member of the team. We have this, and it just went on and on and on. And then it was like, well, why don't we just put them out there freely? And people can choose and use whenever they want. And just kind of, maybe people are embarrassed or they don't want to ask or they feel like, why should I have to ask for additional support? So we started to build that into everything we do. Hence the materials in yellow now, because it was nice, it was easy. And if it opens up for access, then we should be doing that for everything and take that notion of how we build for everybody.
I think we're going to need to wrap up soon, but I've got a final question here that I think it's a nice one because it's both pragmatic and creative, which is what this is all about, presumably. So removing physical barriers can be costly. So just thinking about creative and economical ways to kickstart this process, and I guess that's a nice segue from what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the whole issue of starting now. Where do you start and what are some sort of, I guess, economical and creative ways to start? Who wants to take that? Jeremiah's going to take it.
It's burning for me because I don't think it is not impossible, okay? Like an example is for me to create a concert. And for me, if the concert is meant to be for everybody, then I will have to compromise on the lighting, on the sound and all that because if you're creating a concert for people with autism, then sudden lighting, sudden sound will be, they will react or respond against it. So what I did was that we wanted to have two concerts, one in the afternoon and one in the evening. And the afternoon concert would be children-friendly. That means I don't mind if the child runs around in the concert space. It's brighter than usual. We don't use so much haze. The sound level is not as loud as a usual concert. The evening concert can be, in that. It is just having to think through a little bit more. It just starts very gradual, small steps that we can make. And eventually we find a balance that I can have the concert that can serve everyone without having to compromise, the maximum enjoyment of a concert.
Yeah. And I would just say you got to start with the end in mind. So if you're going to do that, then your budget should reflect that. So if you're going to do a project or a performance or a program and you're looking at how you're going to finance that, the access should already be costed in there. So it's not being like, right, we're going to do it, now we need to try this and change this and do this. So until we can kind of get into the notion of actually doing that at the very beginning, then they won't be costly because that's just how much the project would cost.
I think from the facilities planning or architectural conservation point of view would be sometimes talk about what you're really trying to do and what's the value. So it may be very nice to have a wonderful children's gallery in an antique 19th century space. But if you have to spend £10 million doing that to bring all such, maybe it's better to put that money into a brand new space in the next block and use the 19th century space for something else that will be equally meaningful but will present less challenges. So I think we just need to figure out what we are trying to protect, what we're trying to create, and find alternatives that we can agree on.
너무 좀 이론적으로만 들릴 수도 있겠지만 단기적으로는 어쩔 수 없이 경제적인 관점 잣대를 대는 것보다 예를 들면 저희 박물관에서 프로그램에서 한 명당 얼마가 투입되느냐에 대한 논쟁이 있었습니다. 하지만 시각장애인이나 장애인 같은 경우는 어쩔 수 없이 한 회에 그 정도 비용이 들어가는데 인원이 작을 수밖에 없는 상황이 있는 거거든요. 그렇기 때문에 오히려 여러분들이 저와 소통하기 위해 번역기가 있어서 소통하는 것처럼 그 금액을 투자한 만큼 사실은 서로 소통하고 장기적으로 보면 훨씬 경제적인 것이라고 생각이 들고요. 사실 그런 부분 때문에 이런 장애인의 액세스를 더 높여야 되는 문제에 대해서 저희가 더 공감하고 더 토론되고 해야 된다고 생각됩니다. 예.
I agree. Okay, on that note, I'd like to thank this wonderful panel, this very interactive panel, and thank you all for your interest and your engagement, and I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you as well to our moderator, Dr. Meredith Martin, together with our panelists. Can we have a group photograph, please? Once again, Mr. Chet Magichi, Mr. Jeremiah Choi, Mr. Calvin Ang, and Ms. Kim Yoon Yang. Thank you very much, together with our moderator as well, Dr. Meredith Martin. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all of you still have your mobile phones. If you could please help us. On Pigeonhole, there is a poll, there's a feedback. So, of course, this will go a long way in helping us create better events, curate better events for you. So please help us, if you can, do the feedback for us now for day one. All right, but otherwise, I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you very much. So if you could please help us, just take a minute or so. It's very quick. It's just some Q&A questions for some feedback. Now, as you're doing the feedback, just want to inform all of you a bit more about tomorrow as well. All right, so if you're coming tomorrow, registration starts at 8:30 a.m. We will begin promptly at 9. Please remember to bring your badges because Esplanade is very strict about this. You may not be able to come in if you don't bring your badges. So please remember to bring your badges. Also, I want to let all of you know as well, in case you haven't noticed, now on the top right-hand side, we do have a very talented graphic recorder, Miss Wendy, who has very well captured all our discussions today. So on the way out, you can take a look at, yes, it's on the screen. All right, so very beautiful images captured graphically. So tomorrow, we will actually print out this for all of you. All right, so if you come tomorrow, we will be printing out and giving to all of you based on our discussions for day one. If not, if you'd like an e-copy, you can also leave us your email. We'd be glad to give you an e-copy as well. All right, so with that, this marks the end of day one. Great discussions today. Thank you very much to our panel 3 as well. And of course, thank you to all our speakers and thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. On behalf of Culture Academy, I wish all of you a fantastic Thursday. We'll see you bright early first thing at 8:30 tomorrow. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.